Get ready for some Trash Tier Tuesday. Where are all those awesome boxes at? I need me some awesome boxes. Awesome
fucking boxes on boxes on boxes. Energy mag? Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll keep the Havoc. I don't know. Like sometimes I can really smoke people with the Havoc. Ooh, fucking flatline. Hell yeah, I like that shit, bro.
Actually, you know what? I'm gonna go with the Mozambique and the purple shotgun bolt and the hammer point. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna try that.
Anybody got any heavy around?
I have some heavy.
I don't have a lot.
I have 45 bullets.
A light gun. I'm looking for a light gun.
Somebody zipping? Somebody zipping?
I'll find some here. Oh yeah, okay. 2 of them.
Yeah.
Were they up top?
Oh, they're right here too?
I'm coming!
Took forever to switch guns. Behind us.
You bitch ass hoe.
Oh, good try.
I was waiting for squad wipe on squad wipe. I almost had 2 in a row.
Man, that would have been badass. I was very close to that.
But apparently a lot of damage was shared. I almost killed 6 people and only did 325 damage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it seemed like I was doing more. Oh, I was not.
Yeah, it was still kicking ass.
Yo, Facebook is not a...
You were just being a chess player.
Again. You were saying stuff?
No,
I was gonna say Facebook is not approving my posts because the videos are violent. This video game videos are violent of people being shot.
What?
Yeah.
No way, dude. Facebook is not approving your posts because your posts are violent?
But I see other game streamers on there. They advertise.
All the time.
It's not letting me.
There's violent ass shit on Facebook. And this is the
yeah, I appealed it and I sent in my thing like it's the video is footage of Apex Legends, which is a battle royale and you have to survive by killing everybody else. And that's the game I play most. So it's
I'm looking at your stream.
Right.
I mean, your stream is live.
Yeah, no, the stream's going up, but like to actually like advertise, to do like an ad. So I posted, I guess it was yesterday's post. I normally can't even try the advertising because I mentioned a day that I'm streaming. So I made a point on yesterday's post to not do that and just to say like when I am live. And then when I went to boost it, it's like, nah, it's not approved because it's violent and it doesn't support our positive community that we're building.
Oh, shut up, Mark Zuckerberg, you bitch.
Yeah, dumbass bitch hoe.
You stupid ass, suck ass bitch.
Sucker ass.
You sucker ass bitch.
Didn't let me in the fucking building again.
Oh, we got the company, and I got no
I got a P2020, a hope and a dream.
Oh, kick you in the head, bitch.
I picked up a couple splodies. That's all I got.
I just got a shotty.
I'm burning this bitch, and I got my mitts.
Oh.
I got my mitts. What are you gonna do? I burned him and punched him twice. There we go.
Oh, I got somebody else got me.
I see them. They're right behind that blue bench, Joe.
Yeah, I was fighting some money.
There's like 3 guys. I might not should have thirsted that guy, but I'm kind of glad I did because I like to claim my scalps.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, need the kills to get the pills.
Earlier, I kept having like high-ass damage games and no kills.
Oh yeah, I hate that shit.
Like 600 damage, 0 kills.
Yeah, we were doing good in this our single game with a decent random earlier, Joe, and damn, we got just fucked on the third party.
Yeah.
Like it looked empty all around us, and we start fighting this one party, and then somebody comes from behind the same place in the train tunnel.
And then we kind of ducked, and they started fighting, and then we came in and started killing them, but then another team came, and yeah, we were just like third party on third party.
Wasn't fair.
Oh, Zeddy, what's up? Welcome to this.
Not fair.
Zeddy said, this is, he probably put this back when we were talking about the Facebook shit. He said he's a Zucka Majucka. Very clever, very clever. I appreciate it.
What a Zucka Majucka, man. Fuck them Zucka Majuckas.
Zucka ass Majuckas. See, I wasn't sure if I was gonna play or stream tonight, but I'm possibly giving up 2 stream nights this week, so I thought that I would do it.
Yeah.
Do things.
Figure I'll probably stream Thanksgiving, but tomorrow I might be going to.
You going to Kim's house, Kim's parents?
Yeah,
on Thanksgiving?
but it's like early. It's like 1 or 2 o'clock. And then might be going to meet my half brother tomorrow. And then.
Oh yeah, so you might go there with your full.
Yeah. Zero, your jump master whenever you're ready.
Oh, my bad, my bad.
Stop reading your freaking articles.
Sounds good to me.
The fire. Hell.
Yeah, I see that.
The burning.
The fire crotch with the sky penis.
There's Hell 2.0. The other one's the hell ass bitch.
We got a squad leading right next to us.
I'm going here up, and so is 2 other mofos. So I just gotta be the toughest bitch here, but I'm not.
Yeah, Zero like crashed me into the wall.
Shit. Oh shit.
Yep, I'm falling down.
I'm coming towards you.
Dead
Mark
as
the
a
fools.
motherfucker.
Mark them for death.
Oh, God.
I'm gonna hide. They're up here. But I'm hiding behind this bitch. So you guys can just take your time. You guys hold minutes. So
Alright, I knocked one. Oh, it's gonna kill me.
Shit.
I can't get out of here. Oh my God.
I'm with you.
Killing yourself?
There's a fucking
Somebody's coming.
Spitfire.
Thank you. I need to heal up real quick.
Somebody
Me
just
too. Me too.
ran past there.
Sounds like somebody's being brought back already. Oh, there's people right over here.
Else.
Well, I might have like 20 seconds left to live.
You got 30.
Shit.
Oh, they're getting somebody up?
30. Wait, it's a total of 60, right? I definitely don't know. It's like 10% now. When it said it was like a third.
Shit. I'm trying to get to. Oh shit! I can't get to you. Oh goddamn. I didn't have my. I hit reload. Oh, there's 2 guys.
Good.
How many people landed?
Yeah, I'm about to lose this fight. Yep, we all went to sleep.
I guess that was 3 squads. Maybe it was just 2.
Yeah, when you said 20,
Good man.
I looked at your thing and it said 30. That's why I said that.
Well, what's the
I don't
total
know.
though? Because it was 1/3 of the triangle.
90 then, I guess. And it changes every time you go down.
There's no way it gives you 90.
I don't know.
You think?
He definitely had 30 seconds left. That's what it said, yeah.
Really? But that seemed to go faster than 30 seconds also.
Who's your half brother? Is that like your mom?
My mom's
son?
actually crazy story. My mom and
So his mom and his mom's brother had a kid and no one knew it.
basically,
Crazy story.
and if you know my mom's brother,
That's why
he's definitely related to my
only half
mom.
his brother, 'cause the other half is his cousin.
Yeah,
That's why.
It's a cousin,
Yeah.
brother.
it's a brother cousin.
So go
Did he
ahead.
dodge?
I was just
Did he
fucking
dodge
around. I don't need that.
Did he dodge the retard gene? Or like,
I say no,
Not quite sure.
but
is he like a member of the royal family?
yes, yes. Nah, he seems like a decent dude. He's got different views than I do, but he seems like an alright guy. He was in the military. He served our country, which I can respect. He's like 50 or whatever.
Oh wow! It was somebody your mom married
No,
before your dad?
my mom had a secret baby when she was 16 years old that we just found out about like 3
okay.
years ago or something. So like we had no idea he existed, and he like messaged my brother on Facebook with this whole long thing like, "Hey,
That's interesting.
you don't know me, and you should sit down."
Because you might
Yeah,
think
like. So like everything he told us,
Shit, I'm
yeah,
already
everything
sitting
he
down.
be like, I read my Facebook on the toilet, bitch. But everything he told us, we
I fell off.
checked.
Shit, I'm going in this bar.
We checked with like people that were close with my mom when she was younger, and like they're aware that there was a time when she left, I guess, high school, and like went away for like a while and was gone for like 6 months, and then when she came back, she switched schools and went to a different high school. I think somebody's on me. I got 0.
Blue ass vest.
Here's your.
He's shooting.
You can
they're
take
shooting
that.
from that. Oh, thanks. I'm dropping an Eva.
I drop bullets for it.
Alright, I am on my way right now.
Sorry, Joe. I'm dropping him right
Yeah,
now.
no, it's all
I
good.
have to heal.
I picked up the charge rifle. I mean, I'll take the bullets for later, but
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah,
might
yeah.
switch. But
That dude was down in that lower level.
Are you guys
Yeah.
still up top?
building. I just jumped now.
oh, right here.
Shotgun ammo. Oh, what the fuck?
Broke her shield.
That's not cool, buddy.
Hit her for 55 more.
Shoot my.
Oh, I'm being
friend.
charge rifle from behind.
Shit. Right. Two
I need
guys
something
right
that's
here.
not a fucking sniper would be nice.
What the fuck? Yo, how the fuck did I get mowed down so quick? It didn't even seem
Damn.
fair.
We getting that bad luck. Oh, nice, Joe. Way to go. I'm kind of trying to distract them with my. They're getting their buddy
Yeah, I
off.
was trying to find some heals. But
Oh, there's yet another dude. Oh, that's third guy, I guess.
What? Yo. Yeah, this shit.
so I'm doing 2
So
things at
on
one
my
time. No problem, Zeddy. I appreciate you
Right.
being here. And
I
when the hell
run
did
up.
you come from, Mark?
And then I see dudes
Since
and
birth,
shoot
I
at the
came from
same time as
Arkansas,
them on my stick,
Arkansas.
and then instantly die. But on my
You see that?
decorative
14
cap,
damage. Big numbers.
19 by snow, 14 Russell, 19 snow, 14 Russell, 19 snow. I'd be 38 to snow. 28 Russell, 38 snow, 42 Russell, 19 snow.
Oh,
so
what the fuck?
apparently, it was like both of them were non-stop shooting me at the same time, even before it registered on my screen. Most of the damage was done before I shot back, apparently. But
That's
on my
crazy.
screen, it looked like we shot at the same time.
Damn, that's crazy.
Gotta upgrade the interwebs.
Wait. What did I say it did to them? I'm pretty sure it didn't say 72. I think it said 30 something. This shit's all fucked up. So I did 72 damage, but I'm pretty sure the only people I fought was that guy right there, and it was only 30.
Yeah, but that's just the end recap. So if you shot somebody before, like I've had that where like stuff doesn't.
That's right. I downed the other person.
Right.
I forgot about that. I did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man, doing it up with 14 damage. I'm doing big things over here, bro. Big things.
But still, this shit was
bigger than
crazy.
13.
I had a decoy up there. There's a decoy blocking where I was running to, so I don't even know how they were both shooting me at the same time. They couldn't even see me. And I ran up, and the one was on an angle, so it doesn't even make sense how they could be shooting me before I get there.
Yeah, I hate it when it's instantaneous.
I should have recorded a recap. Because, yeah, the recap doesn't match up with the finishing death shit.
That's why you should be streaming it. You can take clips, you could send it to Apex and be like, yo, your shit's mucking up, bro.
Your shit's whack.
Get that shit.
Let's see, this one guy was talking about his one download speed, internet, and a stream.
You want to do a train?
That's terrible. 1 gigabyte. Sure.
Oh, yeah, I think a little sooner. I would jump on this side of the rock. Oh, you know what? I think I pinged the perfect place to land in the front car, actually. This is what I'm planning on. Alright, you going there? I'll go here.
We got people up at the front, and they got purple shield up at the front.
Go back. Yeah, I don't got a gun. I gotta get back there.
Oh, somebody's pushing Grim.
Yeah, I'm right behind you.
We got your back, bro.
Alright, I'm gonna chase these guys. I don't have any fucking guns, so.
Oh shit.
Oh, Grim left. Grim left.
Well, the train is.
Oh yeah, so there should be bins popping up, right?
Yeah, you might want to come back, Grim. Oh shit, there's people. Fuck!
I got you, bro. You ain't dying on my watch.
You know what am I gonna do over there? I don't got no guns.
Scare them with your silly faces. Yeah, let's go.
I'm running, Joe. He was stomping at me from the other side.
Yeah, he's pretty good. I threw some grenades, but oh, still good.
No, I'm gonna go in here and look for stuff.
All right.
I think I hear footsteps behind us.
5 health.
Yeah, I got like 50, but it's not looking great.
I got 2 syringes I can give you guys. Yeah. Oh, you're both here now?
I'm zipping down.
Ooh, a gun. Fuck yeah. So what'd you get? A gold, was it Eva out of that?
Yeah.
Box? Yeah.
Yeah, I started to throw it down, then I noticed it was gold as I was throwing it. I was like, nope. And plus, I picked it up just before a guy snatched it, like an enemy. So, and then he got.
Here's 2 syringes. That's all the heals I got.
It is helpful.
Somebody was over there. So.
Alright.
They're gonna shoot us.
So the Mozambique, there's also P2020 that dropped up there. I have hammer points that I just picked up.
I heard some fire just a second ago, I think behind us.
Alright, there he goes. Yeah, there's 2 more syringes.
Body shield for Mr. Grimbo.
Oh, fucking anvil bullshit. You guys don't want to
no, I'm good. I don't have it.
No.
Oh shit, are we shooting somebody?
Oh, now I'm doing the ball.
He was shooting at the vault.
It did drop.
Oh, I got on blue. That's exactly what I
It doesn't look like it's red at all anywhere. No vault. There's some syringes. There's a U site.
Somebody's shooting at us from over in that area. I mean, past there.
Come in. I'll bring this for you.
No,
I just picked up a
kills here.
syringe from that thing you knocked down. Bringing it back to you.
Oh, hell no. Got one kid.
I see them. I'm coming.
Busted this one's shield. Busted the robot shield. Joe, you might want to take
Yeah, there's somebody shooting from afar, too.
Yeah, I guess fight the guy that's up. Yeah.
I got this
Alright,
OS bitch.
Here's this guy crawling, trying to get to some kind of cover.
Damn, they're sniping like... That must be the dudes that were
shit.
sniping us before. Right where my ping is. Over there.
Oh, yeah. He's getting his buddy up. He's getting his buddy up right
Get him
here.
up.
He's getting his buddy up.
Oh! I was off by like one bullet. Motherfucker, no! Run away, run away,
Good try,
run away.
good try.
Now they're coming.
No!
Oh, shit.
I got the one that got him up. The other one, I put some bullets into. Shit.
Oh, no.
Yeah, man.
That was weak. Yeah, good try.
I downed the tough one first and then went for the weak one. And.
I couldn't imagine having
every time that thing's
a whole gigabyte. I got like 100 megs up and down, so my internet's pretty good, but...
Alright.
I'll drop that, make you
oh, okay.
Alrighty then. Let's try this again. So Zed just said that he was watching a stream and the guy was talking about his 1 gigabyte internet, their download speed. Which I'm like, that's pretty sweet. Like, I got 100 megs up and down, so mine's pretty good, but like...
Oh yeah, it's more than most people need.
Yeah. Well,
unless you got like a household of 6 or something, or 5.
Yeah, now we have enough things connected to it. Usually not all at once. When I stream, like at night we do. Like it's my Xbox, Kim's Xbox, my computer, both phones. She might have her laptop open or whatever. So like we have a bunch of things. But
oh yeah, word. Yeah.
And I usually don't have any issues. But usually, I mean, for the most part, when I'm not streaming, it's only a couple things. But we don't have cable, so like, I think we pay like, we got a deal where it was like 50 something a month, and then after like a year it went up. I think it's like 72 or 75 bucks a month for just the internet.
Oh, that's a good price. Yeah, that's a good price. I pay since I live out in the sticks. I have to pay like 75 bucks. I don't have to have residential, landline phone service, but I do just because I've had this phone number for like many years, and it's just kind of a touchstone to the past. And so like I just keep it. So for 20 meg down,
I think there's somebody over there.
2 meg up internet and local phone service, it costs like 75 bucks a month. Which is ridiculous as fuck, but there's not much competition,
right? And that's such a scam.
Like,
I hate that. The Comcast is like that.
Oh,
or like,
it is.
You don't really have an option, so they charge you ridiculous, and their service sucks, and it's.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but in Chattanooga, like 70 miles away from me, the electric power company has fiber internet down there that's gigabit, and it's like, I want to say 60 or 70 bucks a month for gigabit.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty decent. I mean, I'd move to Chattanooga for that. Oh, I'm being shot! I'm being shot! I'm being shot! And there should be a vault key over here.
I'm coming. Oh, okay, I'm coming to help you though. I think they're upstairs in here.
They're here somewhere.
Wish they'd
I'm looking for the.
Like men.
Why, it won't let me pick the vault key up. All right, I got it. All right, sweet. I'm coming to you.
Come on, you nutless bastards.
Yeah, let's go upstairs.
Come get some.
Oh, right here. Oh, the Havoc took forever to charge up. They're running away. They're hanging out right there.
She is almost
Come on,
dead.
team. Alright,
had no
teammate got
armor.
her. Oh, being sniped from
Oh, somebody else
the train
is stopping
tracks.
from over there.
There, yeah. Shit, I don't have any fucking heals.
There's a syringe right there, but there's a dude sniping at us.
Oh, run away, run away. Oh, shit. Oh, I thought I picked up heals.
Oh, Joe, they're just down. Oh, there's two guys here. There's two guys. Yeah, one ran around. They're both up top. One is executing me and him, and they're both together. They're both together.
Alright, let's see what I can do. Probably not much with this little bit of shit I got.
One is coming down the stairs or jumping down. The other one's looking down from up top. That's one.
I have a...
I'm crawling away if they're not going to execute me.
They might be leaving you alive as bait, and I'm fucking falling for it.
Yeah, I'm crawling like away from you
lay off
a
my
little bit. They got me.
They got me too. I got 75 minutes.
Yeah, that was a rough
49.
situation.
Yeah, that's not bad. 75 megabytes for 49. Now, is that you have 75 up and down,
yeah,
Zeddy,
that's-
or?
No, I've got no.
Well, yeah,
oh,
you
shit.
too. Is yours up and down the same?
No, mine's nothing like. Mine's 20 meg down, 2 meg up.
That's right. You did just say that. Yeah, and it sucks that there's no options like.
Yeah, it blows.
Like now, Verizon is in the like TV doesn't matter anymore, but for years, like we had Comcast and then like it's just bullshit dealing with them, and like the customer service is garbo, 100% garbo. Like they just don't care. pure garbo. Yeah,
pure
they
garbo.
just don't care. So then like we've switched over years. Like we've had Pop Vision and some other like no name thing, but now that Verizon's in the game, it's like there's a competitor who's like on the level of Comcast. So it's not, I guess it's not terrible,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I don't use their cable service anymore. So okay, so it's 75 down and 25 up. Yeah, mine's 100 both ways, which is really good.
Oh yeah, it is.
And I'm happy with it. And we actually got it because we had Comcast when we lived in the city, and I kept getting booted. Like I was playing. This is when I was playing Overwatch all the time, and I would be playing like a competitive match, and then all of a sudden I would get booted, and then like I'd start it up and do it again, and I'd get booted, and then like it happened so many times. Like I got a penalty where like I couldn't play for like 5 minutes, and then like then it was like 10 minutes, and then it was just like all, and it was just like ruining my score and like all this stuff, and I was so frustrated. My girlfriend's like, all right, once like next week when we get paid, we'll call and we'll see what it costs to switch, and we'll just whatever. We were out of the contract, so we didn't have to pay a cancellation fee, but
Yeah, it's probably
yeah,
worth it,
and we
though.
went.
I mean, to avoid all
Yeah,
that
and I mean
frustration.
it was such shit, man. This teammate is a loot goblin.
We got guys approaching us from the other side of the
I'm
wall.
gonna grab this vest real quick. Alright.
Well, I thought we did. They're probably in the next building.
So there.
They're somewhere
Alright,
real
I'm with you.
close.
Fuck goblin of loot. Oh, they're in the construction building, definitely. Sounds like they're in this building. Yep.
Oh shit. Yep.
Nice shooting.
Oh yeah.
I'm not letting teammate get anything. Oh, behind us.
Behind us. I hit him for 90 something, maybe 100 something. Oh, sorry. Oh shit. Oh shit. On the street. Oh goddamn! They got me with a shotty right here.
Oh my! I'm doing terrible, man. This is definitely a trash tier Tuesday.
That was terrible.
Knucklehead. That was.
What was that? What show was that? Used to make fun of Charles Barkley. I can't remember it. I think it. Oh, it was fucking Mad TV. I think with Aries Spears. It'd be making fun of Charles Barkley's. I don't know if it was Sports Desk or something. Some sports commentary show on ESPN. Call everybody a knucklehead.
Gotta be challenges. So I guess this season's almost over. It's been 9 weeks of season 3.
Oh,
really?
is it? Oh, I'll probably have enough money for the next battle pass. There are 1,000 of these.
Yeah, I should. Yeah, I gotta max out my battle pass. I gotta get all my monies. I don't know what level I am.
I've got most of my weekly shit done. I'm missing a few.
Yeah, week 9 just opened up. That's what brought my attention to it. That we're coming up on the end here.
Oh, I'll have to look at
But yeah, so I gotta knock out my dailies. I gotta do 300 in shotguns. And I need 3 headshots with octane. So being lifeline doesn't help.
Yeah, get some fast guy.
Some fast guy action.
This is your champion.
Life is meant to die. Accept your fates.
Yo, what up?
Hey,
Rainbow Slice. So yeah.
Gang?
yeah, I don't care if we. I mean, if you want to invite us, I don't care to. We're not in a ranked game or anything. I don't care if we.
No. Invitimo Sentimo. It's
Yeah,
Spanish.
that's how you speak Spanish. I feel bad.
Oh, I accepted the invite. Okay.
Oh yeah, I just left the fucking thing like a dummy. Invito sento unacceptado menstrual.
You didn't send it. You
Look,
accepted
you don't know
it.
how to
Yeah,
speak
like-
Spanish, bro. I accepted no sento the invito. I definitely did. I know my Latin America.
You definitely did.
No, at work yesterday, there's this brand that we carry, and I thought it was just like the porcelain type stuff, like the cookware and the mugs and the whatever. It's Ray Dunn, and I thought at first when they talked about Ray Dunn, I thought it was like that's what the stuff is. It's not porcelain anymore, but it's made out of this Ray Dunn material. Then I realized, oh, Ray Dunn's
Why some
right.
other
And I
vegetable
realized Ray
or-
Dunn's the actual brand, and I was talking to some lady who normally like works on the floor, and she was helping me in the back.
Wait. So did they keep telling you over and over do the same thing, and you're like, yeah, that's Ray Dunn.
That's Ray Dunn. It. No, but I'll use that on Friday when I go back. That shit's Ray Dunn. Didn't.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's Ray Dunn. Dude. Stop telling me that shit.
And so she's talking about like the customers come in.
Do you guys see
Yeah.
this crazy shit too?
Yeah.
First thing in the morning, a guy and 2 women come in. They like we don't open till 9:30, but we usually have like a powwow sometime between 9 and 9:30, and like they're like at the doors like waiting to come in. Sometimes they get let in early, and they go straight for the Ray Dunn stuff, and they buy it, and then they sell it on, I guess, Amazon or whatever. Yeah. So I was talking. I missed the top cart. So I was talking to one of the older ladies at work, and she's like, "Yeah, Ray Dunn's actually like a person. It's like some Oriental." I'm like, "That's not okay to say anymore." Like, what generation are you coming from?
Where you guys?
Oh, gotcha, bitch. You mess with the best and you don't
Oh
like
shit!
the rest.
Oh, he got the Spitfire and I didn't. I'm dead. Oh.
Shit, where they is? Oh.
Woo, this bitch getting smoked.
Oh, and they got a peacekeeper. I'm dead.
Coming in behind.
Ah. Shit, I only have 4 bullets left. I can't handle that shit. Too much for me.
They're looting and nothing out of my box.
As yo. There's somebody over there.
Sucky, sucky.
I only have a 301. I have only 4
There's
bullets
somebody on
in
the
my
other side of
gun.
that wall, Grim. That's where I was killed. In that area to your left.
Well, I can't kill him with 4 bullets. Let me check these bullets.
Oh shit, I don't have spare ammo. I've only got 15 bullets. I got a scout.
You need
Hey, there's a 99
you
in that
need
box.
syringes? I got syringes for you, bro.
Yeah, I do. But there's a guy right on the other side of the wall too. Where'd he go?
Okay,
Yeah, see, my bar is like halfway done and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have 40 seconds left.
Thank you.
that's all
So
I
it
got.
must give you 90 seconds.
You any bullets? No.
You know what I mean?
I don't know where that
Yeah,
guy went. I heard him.
I should have got that. Where was that 99 at?
It's past this wall
At least
to your
could use
left.
the full clip in there. Oh yeah, I downed a couple people. They probably got something in the box. I don't know if they died.
Yeah, you
though.
got 2 kills.
Oh, Joe.
Oh, I did. Okay. Then I guess I did.
Yeah, we've killed 4 so far.
Thank you, sir.
That's one kid. I thought
Yeah,
he
it's a
had
rough
me
Tuesday,
there.
Zeddy.
He was shooting me in the back. Oh, here.
Shit.
Yeah, suck it. Give me my
Got
next
him?
kill.
Train's coming in. Does look looted. I don't know if anybody's on it. Sorry, Zero. I just need some stuff.
There's an Eva.
No, no. I just heard. Oh, that was you. Okay.
Train's here. Did you use those syringes or you got hurt after?
I did. I've gotten another fight.
I have a med kit.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I need it. Thank you. Yeah, we'll hit this. Oh.
I just dropped an Eva. And I have a bunch of bullets for it.
I'm gonna stick with what I got, I guess, for now.
And I got some syringes I can give you 2 again.
You dropped an Eva, you said?
This
Alright.
kid.
Oh shit, I thought I had more light bullets. Did I drop them? What the fuck? I only have
I didn't
9.
see
I can use that.
You didn't drop the med kit yet, did you?
Alright, here you go. No,
Whichever one you
oh,
want
wait.
to drop. I don't
Here,
care if it's syringes
you
or
take
med
the
kit or
med
what.
kit, so I could use a syringe.
Oh, here's somebody. Here's somebody.
Oh shit!
Oh, it's a whole fucking squad. I broke one shield.
Did
Three of 'em right in
115 to the
your
bitch
face.
on the roof?
They're all around this building.
Ah, I was getting shot from back and forth.
Yeah, that was the whole squad came and third partied us.
But you can keep them.
What?
Oh no!
That's
what
the
did
same
they hit you
squad.
with?
That's all the same
fucking
squad.
hell.
Fuck, man.
Yeah, we had 5 kills. I mean,
Yeah, nice.
I wonder if one kid survived and brought back 2 of those bitches. That would piss me off. I don't think that's the case, though. I don't think they would have been all looted up and ready to fight.
It's possible.
Yeah. Yeah, this kid was chasing me across the zip line with like a P2020 and shot me and took a pretty decent amount of health off of me, right? And I pick up a 301 and turn on him as he jumps in the car behind me and kill him before he can kill me. I was like, phew, man, I didn't have much health at all, man.
Yeah, it's
Step to the wrong
it's nice
gangster.
when things like that work out.
The wrong gangster.
Heck yeah, man.
It's not nice when you get pooed on your chest every game.
No, it sucks.
BRB chat. I'm taking you guys with.
What about us? Are you not telling? Oh, you're taking us with you. Wait, but if you take us with you, you're taking chat with you too. Oh, you muted it? But they can hear you. Oh, because you muted yourself. Ah, right. It's only the mic, not the headset.
Oh,
mic.
you've got, okay, yeah, that's cool. I didn't know you had it set up like that. That's pretty cool. So you can use
Damn,
the
so
same
you can-
audio for all your streams.
So, what'd you say? You're taking shit? Oh, and you don't have toilet paper? Oh, man. You can't contest it because they can't hear you.
Oh.
I won't repeat that.
Oh, yeah, man. That makes me want Lunchables every time you talk about them, man.
Yeah, Lunchables are good.
Been a
You wanna go to
while.
hell?
We can land here.
No, Joe's not here.
I'm going back in the room right now.
Forget that.
Oh,
No, we're kind of late on that.
I mean-
We'll do some else.
yeah. Yeah, wherever.
It was like a...
Never too late to go to hell.
You would have dropped after people though. I mean, we're all going to hell. You want to do a train? You want to do a train?
We can land here.
Yeah.
Jump. Too late for that.
I was waiting for you guys to jump for me. Yeah.
That's not how this works.
I'm going to the middle box.
All right. We got two others. Maybe that's your shit.
There's like a
Maybe
million
that's your
motherfuckers here. Oh, and I didn't get anything. I should probably jump off.
I'm dead.
No, get that's my purple shield.
I jump off, Zero.
Okay, I'm dead.
Jump off. I don't think.
I got shot to death trying to beat the people up there, beating up Zero.
Shit, am I supposed to microwave this?
Damn. Yeah, we were late to that party. And where I jumped, apparently that's where everybody jumped. It was
Am I supposed?
purple vest and a wingman. And yeah.
I don't think you might.
No, you normally don't, but this is like a breakfast sandwich Lunchable. It's like a sausage and cheese.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Has Lunchables kind of branched out from the 90s?
Nah, usually,
Usually
they are cheese and crackers, and I have one here that's the nacho one. Also, but the Lunchables, Brunchables breakfast sandwich, doesn't say to microwave it, but like, I don't see how you.
Oh,
It
yeah,
does. It's
so,
Yeah.
weird cold.
you know, Apex goes up to level 100.
Yeah.
Well, they're releasing a new thing that makes you up to level 500. And then you get Apex packs more often. Like every other level from like level 100 or level 30 to 100 something and maybe less often after that. But yeah, I don't know if you're a higher level, if you'll start at 100 or if you'll just like automatically be given like the 500 level or whatever and all the Apex packs. I won't be surprised if they make you just go to 100.
Yeah.
Because I'm almost level 600. Apex tabs is wrong. I looked at it and said I was like 370. I'm like, there's no way. So I did the math. I'm like 588 or something.
Harder, faster, stronger.
What, based on your experience points or something?
Yeah, you get 600 per level of the red shit.
Okay.
and all the legends you buy is 12,000. So, right? Is it 12,000?
12,000. Yeah.
12,000. Yeah. Yeah. So I have the 5 legends. That's 60 grand plus the like 288 or 1,000, whatever I got, whatever it was. Yeah. Level.
Did you
5
ever reset any of your daily
What
challenges?
I'm really at. Nah, but Apex Tabs is just fucked up. It just is. And so's the games shit. Once they started keeping track, like...
Well,
Oh,
it
yeah,
started.
is, definitely,
It,
yeah.
It
got
started
rid of,
from
like,
when it
some of your
started
highest
counting.
shit.
You know what I mean? So like it started counting like season 2 or whatever. Yeah.
From when it started counting. Yeah, but like I was already... A lot of my levels were in the very beginning. That's when I was playing it a lot. So.
Unlike now when you play all those other games.
Yeah. I mean, I still play...
Got him!
anything
Finally
else,
got a fucking knock now, man.
I just need to play more.
I'm coming, Joe.
Oh, I have a gun. Oh, but I'm hearing somebody.
I'm coming. Yeah, I'm coming.
I'm coming, Grim.
Smoke that
Oh,
fool,
Grim got it.
turn him into a box-ass bitch.
Hell yeah.
I need a vest and energy ammo if we see it.
Oh, here's a vest.
There's a hemlock here. There's a vest.
I got a vest out of this.
You want one of them
Oh, it's
weird
empty.
ass shit?
Yeah, I need a full vest would be nice.
Here's energy ammo
Wait,
in a
the
box.
one I
Nah,
think
the
is
one in the
empty?
box that I picked up.
How the fuck is that possible? Oh, and that purple, but yeah, because I switched my vest out after I killed him. Oh, so here, take a couple syringes.
Thank you.
I was surprised. I smoked them from pretty far with the Havoc. It isn't very
Yeah, but the Havoc
I'm
does so
hearing
much
somebody.
damage, you don't need to hit a whole lot of bullets.
So somebody's fighting, but also there's one of those boxes with a key in it. And I kind of want to just do that. Ooh, I got on gold. I'm the fucking man. Let's see what it got. Res. Oh, I'm hearing somebody. Shit. They're right down there. You want go
Yeah, I gotta. I'm looking for energy
Yeah,
on
yeah,
my
they're
way.
fighting each other too.
I want to hit somebody with an arc star.
Oh, behind you, Grim.
Oh, what the fuck? How the fuck did he get up here? Alright, you guys just
got
keep
it.
fighting. I got him. Should I get myself
Yeah,
up in my
yeah,
res shield?
yeah.
No. I'm gonna do it. Yeah, I'm gonna do it.
I broke.
Yeah,
There's two
you
more
just get
guys. I
into
broke
the fight.
his shield. I'm down, but one guy has his shield broken. There's only one more guy, I think.
Oh,
Maybe not. I don't know.
off! Peacekeeper fucking got me. Fuck, man.
Oh, he's getting his buddy. Yeah, yeah. Should have took your vitamins, bitch.
Oh, what?
no,
One-shotted.
no.
Come on.
Oh,
Peacekeeper does things like that.
Come on.
Sucks.
It does.
That was unfucking fortunate. I should have hidden healed up
Indeed.
somewhere.
Yeah, but then you would have probably been facing 3 or something.
Well, I mean, if I heard him getting somebody up, I would have stopped healing. If I was close enough to... I wouldn't have ran far enough to not hear it.
Oh yeah, right.
Damn.
Damn is right. Now it's nacho time. Now that I had that weird ass cold sausage sandwich.
Yeah, I wonder. I kind of want to try Crunchable.
Yeah, it probably would have been really good if it was
Yeah. Doesn't
if
sound
I
bad.
heated up. Like,
Is it like, is the sausage kind of dry? Or?
maybe? I don't know. With the cheese, it was fine. I didn't think it was...
Is it pretty much just, does it just taste like sausage, like, you know, relatively fresh
Yeah, it
sausage?
didn't taste... wasn't bad. Just would have been better if it was warm.
That's cool.
Wait, didn't
No.
you warm it up though? Or it didn't get warm?
No.
Oh,
No.
you didn't even heat it up? The whole thing?
Yeah, I opened it when I was here, and I'm like, oh shit, maybe I should have warmed it up. But that would have been too much work. And these nachos, I don't appreciate how small these fucking chips are.
What is happening? Oh, this shit again.
Oh, it's that shit.
They're like a little bit bigger than a nickel. I don't even know if any of my viewers
A little
a
bit
nickel.
bigger than the what?
Are your screens shaking too? Like normally it wouldn't be shaking.
My
right now.
controller is, yeah, it is. It is.
And I'm going slow as shit. I was only going like 100 and something miles an hour.
Oh, really?
Or SPDs. Yeah.
My
I was
controller
aiming
is
straight for
shaking
here.
too.
Yeah, it usually doesn't do that shit. I'm only in this box here.
Oh, sorry, I was already aiming for it. You go ahead though. I'm gonna zip to
Alright,
another.
I'll go to the next up. Alright, I guess I'll stay here then.
Alright, there was nothing in the box I landed in. I'm going over here now. And energy ammo and some syringes. Oh, and a prowler. But nothing.
I
Nothing
found a
great.
gun.
I see a body running around with his
Here's-
legs. Oh, and they're shooting me with their...
On axe. Up,
I got that.
Thank
fucker.
you. I needed that.
His buddy is coming up.
Damn, bro.
Got his buddy. His buddy's here.
Damn.
Buddy got fucked in the face.
Why was he trying to punch us? The buddy had a fucking real gun. They had a charge rifle and a hemlock, but they're punching us instead. Idiot.
I just heard something. I don't know if somebody landed or...
Ooh, let me get that open accelerant. I want to do some beast mode shit.
I don't know if anybody needs one of those.
With 2x sight
Ooh,
here.
shit. Rare, I'll take that. Son of a bitch.
And an energy bitch.
I'll pick that energy up for now. I might use it later, but if anybody wants it, just let me know and you can have...
Yeah, I
I
got
think I
beast
hear
mode
somebody
ready.
else.
No
Maybe not, I
hostiles,
don't know.
put him that Jowney Jown.
You know that thing doesn't go very far. That Birdman shit.
Oh yeah.
It only
doesn't
scans
go
like
far for sure.
20
Yeah.
feet in each direction or something. But it's useful though. Shut your mouth.
Ah,
SA.
yo, that's racist as shit.
No, you've heard on Step Brothers where the little kids are about to beat them up, and one of and like Will Ferrell says something, that little girl's like, "Shut your mouth, SA."
I don't remember that.
Blue body showed up here, Joe.
I find it funny.
Oh, you don't remember where they go down the street on their bicycles, and there's like the child bullies in like middle school, and the fucking what John C. Riley or whatever Will Ferrell's co-star's name is. He's calling the kid Mr. Gardaki and shit. You gotta watch that
it's
movie again.
been a little while. Shouldn't have left you without a dope
Yeah,
beat
it's-
to step to.
Heck, that movie's probably 10 years old now.
Extended what, Mag? Oh, energy. Oh, those bins are popping up. Oh, somebody just flew into up here somewhere. Back
On the
there.
train tunnel? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can see them right before they shot me.
Shit. I'm trying to get to you.
Yep.
You guys coming?
Yep.
One down.
Shit, where am I getting shot from behind?
Crypto's down. There's a Bangalore bitch up there. Sorry, I want my kills.
Yeah, you picked the wrong fucker to mess with. I got one down, but their buddy's probably
two
getting
are
bumped. Here's a guy
Yeah,
down.
I down the crypto.
There's two guys down. Hey, here's third one. Here's third one. Yeah. Into them.
Yeah, bitch. You ain't nothing but a bitch ass hoe, bitch ass hoe, bitch ass hoe. You ain't nothing but a bitch ass hoe. All the live long day.
Yeah.
There's all these boxes. Yeah.
Walking a scout.
Gotta hop up here.
I'm gonna drop 3 syringes here.
Alright, yeah, I got some syringes. So, you can take them, Grim.
I might need one of them back.
I'm
I
not
don't know.
sure
We'll
if
see.
I
Yeah.
have one.
Well,
I
there's
got
one
plenty.
on the ground there. I
Here.
don't know how much this will heal me. I think I'll be a little shy of 100. But it's good enough, you know.
Up, there's 4 shield cells in here.
There you go.
In that gold box.
There's a bunch of syringes.
I could use
Take
one
'em.
of these syringes.
Take 'em.
And then I'm good.
Take them,
Well,
take them, take them, take them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, alright. We can always share again.
There's a double tap
Things
here.
can be shared.
Just not girlfriends.
I'm in somebody
Stop
for sure.
telling- Oh, yep.
You see him?
Yep.
Down here.
Okay.
Hey, Nita, we got some enemies.
And there's somebody back there behind that car.
Someone else is over there.
Shit. There's somebody right there. I hit him for 44.
Thermite grenade.
Oh, now there's someone behind me. Shit.
Shit.
Damn. Lasered me with the.
This guy's almost dead. He's like 1 or 2 shot right here.
Damn, man.
I was shooting his fucking shield. Like a bitch.
We're getting hit with all the squad.
Yeah. At least I got kills, man. That makes me. I take one step back from the
Yeah,
ledge.
we eliminated 2 squads. I mean,
Soy.
yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, these nachos are pretty good.
Always like a bag of nachos.
That's another
or like,
Lunchable. And they're like, the only problem is like, the nachos are so small. I feel like they're like toy nachos or something, and I'm like eating like pretending like have like a little tea and like luncheon. I don't know.
It's like a chihuahua.
Yeah, like no lie, they're a little bit bigger than a nickel. Do I have any viewers who knows what a nickel is? When's the last time you saw a nickel?
Oh, wait, is that what you said nickel? I thought you said something else.
Yeah, nickel.
I really thought you said
No.
nipple.
Oh, yeah. Ever see a nipple, viewers? You should have 1 or 2.
And if you're lucky, God gave you 3. And if you're lucky,
Bless.
you realize God's not real and religion's a lie.
Get some.
Sick, gotta hustle just to get high.
Nipple City.
Last I seen him, he was in bed, already dead and skins in a pal.
time for some action.
Action Jackson time. Yeah, one of them bot.
Oh, give me guns, you punk ass game.
I'm hearing somebody. I don't know where the fuck they are. Not in here. It don't look like.
It might have been up top. I heard.
Fire
some
shields and
stuff.
guns immediately.
Alright,
I got a vault.
alright. Shot a cargo bot. Tell your friends.
Someone said I'm caustic traps, and it ain't me.
Yeah, I thought I heard footsteps. I don't know.
Where's one of these vests at? What? They're like dropping them all close to us and shit.
Dude, yeah. Well, where the fuck is that
Above
coming
us.
I'm
Yeah,
going
they're
over
probably
to
above
the
us.
vest.
from? Somebody zipping there. Okay.
I need
Yeah,
all the
let's just-
fucking vest. Here you go.
we'll
Zero,
move
here's the
towards-
vest for you.
All right.
Come towards me.
Oh shit. Somewhere up there. Shit.
Giving my shields a recharge.
Dude, where are these bitches hiding? Are they in a glitch? Oh no. Is that snow falling or is that a dude? Somewhere in that area.
Yeah, that's where they were, right? Wait,
Let's go find them. Oh shit, sorry.
No, it's take what is available. Where'd they fucking go? Okay.
This way, for sure.
Not for long, pal.
Recharging shields.
They're like right under me.
Yep.
Maybe above me.
Oh, I heard the
Oh
concert
shit, they're
really
shooting from the
bad.
hill too.
Oh fuck, it's 2 squads, I guess. I don't know.
Sending out my decoy.
Oh yeah, this got it.
I'm
There's
going
a
up real
million of
quick.
these
If you can
fuckers.
hang on, like.
They're
Oh,
on
no!
you, Grim. They're on you.
Got one here.
One more minute,
Yep.
I
amigo.
think that was 2 squads.
So close.
I shot this bitch a little bit. Oh wait, no, there's still 2 of them left. What? I downed one of them.
I just broke her shield. Or Gibraltar shield.
Oh, go Joe. Go Joe.
Damn, man, his gun shield comes back so quick.
Yeah, I didn't realize it recharged. Does it make an indication when it breaks other than just being gone and you're still
Not
being
that I know
shot at?
of.
Does it make a sound?
No, I don't think so. Although you can turn it off, so maybe he had it off and then turned it on once his shield broke. Because I definitely broke his shield. I heard that.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know you'd turn it off, or I didn't remember.
Yeah, it's like down or left on the D-pad or something.
I'll be right back.
I'm running out of nachos here. I wonder if I have chips so I can finish this cheese and salsa.
It's kind of cool he got a nacho one.
Yeah. I just wish.
I went to a salt.
Good. I was just gonna say I would just
What'd you
wish
say?
the chips were bigger, but go ahead. You went to a salsa convention?
I went to. Have you ever been to a
Oh.
Salsaritas? Salsa convention. Have you ever been to a Salsaritas? It's kind of like Moe's or
No.
Chipotle or something.
I've been to Chipotle and
Um,
Cordoba, but never a salsa.
Yeah, Chipotle's. It's very similar to Chipotle, but they're good. But like, my gosh, dude, like, okay, so you'll start out with like a burrito or whatever, burrito, taco, nachos, whatever you want, and depending on the meat, it's like $7 to $8 for that. But then, like, just for nachos, a drink, and queso, it's like an extra $4. And if you want nachos, a drink, and salsa, that's like $3. So I guess that's kind of reasonable. But like, if you want like, you know, a quote unquote premium meat and queso dip, the shit with tax ends up costing you like $13 or something, and it's just like a fucking. I mean, it's the same as you would pay for like one of the cheaper, decent, like the mid-range meals in a Mexican restaurant or something.
Yeah.
It's just like they've got the shit on an assembly line. You'd think it'd be a couple bucks cheaper or something. It was good though. It was
Yeah, every
pretty
time we
good
go to Chipotle, it's like, we both get a bowl, and then I get guacamole on mine, which is like another $2, and then we get a large queso and chips to split, and it's always like $23 or something.
Yeah, it's about the same, right? Yeah, it's just like going to a Mexican
Yeah.
restaurant basically. I mean, you know, maybe not with fajitas, but with something like a mid-range meal.
Except
you know?
it is cold when
But
we
yeah,
eat it because of the drive home.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I like Chipotle, but the one that was close to where I used to eat lunch, like they had made.
Fuck's that
their
noise? Somebody
shit-
flying in?
know.
I don't know what that.
Yeah, somebody right here. Okay.
Let me see if I can find your body shield. No.
Yeah, I hear him very close.
61. Fucking hard to shoot from that far away. Fucking alternator.
Yeah.
There's more people here. Got one fool ass bitch. Where you are, the fool ass bitch? Somebody right here.
You guys are inside?
Yep.
I have no bullets left.
That's another squad. That's another.
Oh, there's a
fucking
guy in
squad.
here. Oh, yep, yep. I'm dead. There was 2 guys over here.
Where you at?
Got another one down.
God damn, he's all shielded up. Yeah, I'm out of fucking bullets.
So there's another squad over here.
Yeah, that was 2 or 3 squads. Because I heard like, maybe it was him. I heard stomping around. It was at least 2 squads anyway. We were fucking up that one group.
Look at that. Putting up
Yeah, that Chipotle.
all them
though,
zeros.
They were really. They were really.
Yeah,
good,
it had to
but,
be another
like,
squad.
One day I went there and like, dude, they made their chicken so fucking salty. Somebody did. It was hardly edible. I mean, it was killing me with heartburn, dude. It was just full of
That
salt,
sucks.
dude. And I really didn't want to go back to it anymore.
I mean, if you would have told them, they
But yeah,
probably
when
would have
Chipotle- when
gave
they're
you a
doing it
new
right,
one,
it's great.
or
Yeah, but I was just like, fuck. I mean,
With free loogies.
yeah. Well, you can watch
Yeah,
them not
free
looting in
loogies.
it.
well, that's true. Yeah, but you know, sometimes when a place has people that just don't give a fuck in it, you just don't want to go
No,
back.
that's true. But I mean, you at least get your money back. I mean, like this was so terrible,
Yeah, that's true.
and I
I
was
should've
so
said
hungry
that.
I had to eat it, and now I feel terrible. So you need to
Yeah.
give me a new one, even though this is empty, and give me my money back. And that cute little chick over there on making the rice, she needs to blow me.
You got blown. Yeah, last thing I turned something back was
I don't fear anything.
so I went to the Ritz, right? Super late. Yeah, after I was talking to you guys, I went to get that steak or whatever.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I got a chocolate milk, right? And like I literally drink milk all day, every day, right? And this sometimes in the summer it happens. When I'll buy a fresh gallon of milk, it'll taste kind of sour. And
Oh
it's
yeah, I've
because
had
it-
that. Yeah.
you know, the temperature went too high at some point, and you know, it's sour a little bit. So like I tell her like, oh yeah, sorry, this chocolate milk's sour. You know, you kind of just get something else instead. And she goes and like her and somebody else are testing the chocolate. I'm like, well, it's not sour, but it's too chocolatey. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, bitch, like it doesn't matter. Even if I made it up in my head, like you still gotta just give me another fucking chocolate milk. And then I get a fucking fillet right? Like you know, filet mignon steak.
Was it $5?
I ordered it medium, and it was literally like extra fucking well done. No, it was pretty expensive though.
Yeah, well,
It
you
was,
$5.
well, no,
$35.
Grim swears that he can get a fillet for $5. Like a year ago, he told me that it was a
Oh,
thing.
if you cook it yourself. You cook
Right,
it
you
yourself.
you have yet to
that's
show me
still
where that's
ridiculous.
from.
You buy a couple packs. What was that? Was that talking about the bacon wrap?
No, you were just talking about fillet.
I don't remember now.
Yeah, it
That
was like
long as
it was like a
ago,
year
but
ago.
If I said it, it's because that's what I
Right,
paid
and
for.
we
wouldn't
bet
fucking make it up.
$10 that you could find $5 filet mignons, and it's been a year, or almost, and I'm still waiting to see this.
Yeah, whatever I said is 100% the truth. 'Cause I
You
was-
said it was $2
So
steaks.
He wouldn't pay
I
you
don't
the
get.
$10.
I don't get my jollies off pretending to get good deals. So if I said it, it was.
Did you want that
Yes,
2X?
I was
size?
trying to pick up the other side for my thing.
There you go. Oh,
I got it.
somebody
I got
else
it. I
picked
got
up. I thought I
it. You,
picked
if
it
you
up.
need it, you can
I
have
didn't
it.
get it.
No, I don't. I don't.
Yeah, I was trying to pick up that 1X for the
Bad shit.
for my prowler, and it dropped my other one.
I could use a bizag.
Was this a grocery
No, no,
store or
no.
something where you found these fillets, though? You think?
Yeah, it wasn't
Like
like,
a
at
special
restaurant
deal?
cooked. It was like you buy it. Yeah, it was probably a deal that I got, and I told him about it. He was like,
Yeah,
"That's
I'm like,
not
there's
real.
no
I
way.
don't
And he's like,
believe you."
$10 says that you can get filet mignon for $5. And I said, look, if you can find it for that, I will gladly pay $10 to know where I can find that for.
And when you asked,
No,
I
you
probably
didn't.
told
You
I
didn't know
got it
where it
from.
was.
I don't remember now. It was
You didn't know where it
probably-
was. Yeah.
No, I didn't know where.
And
it
you were
was.
gonna look and find it,
Store.
and it never happened. And we've talked about it a couple times since then.
The meat mall.
Yeah, the meat mall.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't just make it up. If I said it, it's 100% the truth.
Did you? Have you ever seen those fucking meat trucks? It's like a truck, and they sell
Yeah.
meat out of it, and it's like like you'll see $30 for 20
Mhm.
ribeyes or some bullshit. Dude, there's no fucking way I would buy a ribeye off that shit. And
I mean,
and tip
it's.
that. I
I've
mean,
never bought it, but they used to come to like.
It's got to be a
They
horse
never. They used to
ribeye.
come to like the shop that I worked at, and like I've seen them at other shops.
I've been tempted. To
I mean,
try
it's a
it, but-
refrigerated truck.
I don't
mean,
think.
so like.
Yeah, but how are you gonna sell the same cuts of meat that's like, you know, several dollars a pound for like 30, but like for $1.33 a pound ribeyes? I mean,
Well, I've never
Come on.
seen it that cheap,
All right,
but I've
so I
seen.
really now I don't just really need a bag. I really super need a bag. Will that help me find a bag faster if I update the?
like really.
Yeah, I really super need a bag.
Pray to the bad gods.
Yeah, I haven't seen a bag either.
Bag
All these places
guys.
we've looted.
Give me. Oh, this been looted. We're about to fight. There we go. I prayed to the bad guys. The bag devils.
Told you.
and they repaid me in bags.
That's how that works. And 2 grenades.
All right, you ready to kill people?
Yeah, somebody already. Was that us in this building?
I could use shield cells.
I
only
found 2 bags.
people.
Now there's bags everywhere.
Bags.
Pray to the
everywhere.
god devils, man.
Bags on bags on bags.
But yeah, shield cells. That is what's
Pray to the shield cell
motherfucker.
gods.
I got no shield cells to spare for you.
There's a thing I want if somebody wants that funny shit.
Ooh, yeah, you want
But
a
yeah, I
prowler?
got a flatline, so
Oh, you got
I
it.
saw
Okay.
that. So if I a heavy mag, I could hook up this flatline. That'll help me be a beast. We can start killing.
Yeah, I haven't heard shit.
Another bag. Somebody's
Get
sniping.
out.
Oh,
Ooh,
you
I
just
got
got
sniped from
tased.
behind. I can't even
Yeah,
heal
from-
myself.
Like from the train station or something.
You see them? That's where they
They're
are.
past the building.
Oh,
I see.
oh, there's
Right
people in the
there.
street. Yeah. Broke his shield.
I got fucked up.
Oh, there's somebody right here.
Dead, man.
I have no shield cells
Fuck.
left.
Pathfinder right at the corner of the building.
Yeah, they're all three at the door. They're all three at the door.
Fuck, man.
Yeah, that was.
I downed one, was smoking another one.
We were in bad shape.
Yeah, we were not prepared. We were not prepared.
Oh, I gotta
Yep.
pee. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I'm gonna get a drink.
One of you guys choose your
Alright.
dude, so I won't be jump master.
Yeah, I'm gonna go get a drink. BRBs. Burbs to the burbs.
Good luck. Have fun. Don't die.
Pick me, pick me, pick me. I'm so bored.
All right, let's do this. It'll be fun. If not, well, you know, we all make bad choices. You live, you learn.
Introducing your champion.
They say death catches up to everyone. He can certainly try.
Alright, I'm back. I'm back and I'm loud.
Oh, Joe, do you know somebody named Sarah Grace on Facebook?
I don't know. Not off the top of my head.
They sent me a friend request, and we have like, I don't know, 25 mutual friends or something. I was like,
I'm back.
I don't know who the fuck they are.
Yeah, no, Sarah Grace does not sound familiar. People, oh, that's you zipping. Oh, I'm being shot from behind. That's cool. I like it.
I straight up zipped to this thing and didn't fucking make it. What the fuck?
Oh shit!
Fuck, that
I got
was
one
bullshit.
kid down. There's a kid
Alright.
right here. Two
I got a
kids
charge
right here.
rifle and a Mozambique. Alright,
getting
I'm healing
executed.
up and I'll be there.
I don't understand this shit, dude. My first cart, hanging cart, didn't have anything. I zipped to the next cart, but instead of, I didn't jump off or anything, I just, held forward. And then I just fall and don't make it into the fucking cart. Like, how does...
Yeah, sometimes I just
impossible?
bounce
Like-
out of those or away from those carts. Whether we're flying or I'm zipping or I'm...
I mean, sometimes
Yeah,
I'll
I've been
bounce when I'm
bounced
flying, but I've never zipped into one and didn't fucking make it. Especially if I didn't
Oh,
jump
yeah,
and just
I
held
know.
Yeah, I have.
forward. Like,
I haven't either.
Fuck.
That's crazy.
That's happened at other places, not just there, where like I zip and sometimes I end up like on top of the zipping pole. Sometimes I fall off the edge of wherever I was zipping at.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
It almost felt like I hit my head on the end of the zip thing, and that's what caused me to bounce back out. But
Yeah.
I've never had that happen, dude. Like,
Yeah, well, some of us, maybe it was all three of us, were playing the other night, and I landed on top of the zip line from flying.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
oh, and standing up?
Yeah, and it was only a couple seconds or something.
I'd have to find the clip. I make a lot of clips. I mean, just hitting the Xbox button and then X. But
If you streamed, it would just be so much easier to make your clips.
yeah. I'm gonna wait till you make it big, then ride your coattails.
Sounds good.
Zero, also known as the guy who plays with the CLG
Yeah.
mechanic.
Yeah. ZLG mechanic posse.
Opie, cut it
Hi,
out.
I'm Troy McClure. You may remember me from
Playing with ZLG Mechanic.
films as the one where I landed on the zip line.
Something wrong with your head if you fight me.
Blue
Where we
trains.
going, Captain? A doodle blue? A doodle blue?
Where? Why am I not seeing? Oh, there it is. Never mind.
I'm gonna land in the far back right one.
Might be a
That
good
one.
place to land, but what do I know?
I'll land on the closer right one. Or is that
No,
you,
you
Joe?
do you.
Whatever.
Howlin'.
Are you landing in
care.
a hanging
No.
car? Yeah, you
No.
landing in a hanging car? Now, alright, then do the back one, Zero. So if we zip back, we don't go to the same car. Well, I mean, we can switch lines if we have to. We're wherever we want. I don't really care.
I think I went to the right one so we don't even have to. Ooh, shitty guns. It's the blue zone, and we're the only ones that landed here.
Kings of the Blue Zone.
Hell yeah!
Alright, I'm gonna pick up some things in case you guys need it.
All right.
Actually, maybe I'll pick up one of these bitches.
I don't know where that car. Oh, there it is.
RE-45 here. Optics here. Close range.
Alright, so I
The
dropped
vault
a choke if somebody wants it. Here's another energy mag. Oh, you got a vault key?
No,
That
I was
RE-45.
saying no
where's
vault key.
that? Yo.
RE-45 was over, like, there.
Level, what do you think is over here?
Here's one too, with a white clip.
One of these bins is open, right? Is that what I'm seeing?
Energy mag here. Level 2.
I didn't open
Oh, no,
over
no,
there?
no, it's
Oh, let's go get
closed.
it, Zero.
I thought that bin was open, but it's closed.
Maybe I'm gonna keep the Havoc. I can't even fucking shit up with it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, the Havoc does good damage.
Body shield here. Level, helmet here. Level 2. Got a helmet here, amigos. Level 2. Must go faster. Wingman here. Body shield here. Level 2.
Well, I just want to see if it was dibs. Yeah, I got a blue hat. Oh, so do you.
I got a select fire if anybody needs it.
Oh
Yeah, I'll pick that up. That's that purple thing
No.
on the ground? No, that's Zero.
There.
No.
You see another one, I could use it. I may throw this down for something else, but for now,
You got
I'm
the Prowler?
holding on to it.
What? You got power?
Yeah,
You want a Spitfire?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah. Alright.
If you don't want it, I mean, don't worry about it though.
Somebody just landed.
Okay, thank you. Is that somebody?
Oh, I thought you wanted to pay for the Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you in a minute. Hold up.
Okay.
Optics here.
There's another Prowler up here.
Prowler SMG here.
Alright, here, you just hang on to that. Hang on to that.
Oh, okay, okay.
Somebody just landed over there.
I saw someone, and I don't think they're selling cookies.
Yep, I see them. They're still there.
I'll set a strategic. No, I won't. I don't know where to go. Oh, yeah, they're going there. Oh shit! Oh shit! Bullets! I'm jumping.
Opie, cut it out.
Dude's up here.
Contact with hostile.
Got one.
I got one.
Where's the third?
Got the Birdman doing his
Right here,
bitch
third.
ass beast mode. That bitch ain't no beast. He's coming.
Oh, he's super fucked up.
Coming. Where is he? Back
He's
there?
shielding up. He's shielding
Behind the
up.
fence.
He just shielded. He's got full shield again. Nice.
Nice. Ah, you killed him as he was jumping through the air and his box went
Fuck
flying.
that
Good stuff. Sounds like somebody's throwing grenades.
Box. I don't give no
Yeah,
fuck.
somebody threw a grenade.
I'm taking a.
Giving my shields a
Syringe
recharge.
here.
I'm shielding up from looting.
Hey, compadres. Heavy ammo here.
I don't want to get caught
Yeah,
in
I'm
my
looking for
pants
heals.
down.
Yeah, I was hoping to grab a shield.
Here's 2 little shield cells. You
No,
need shield cells?
There's a
That's good.
shield battery and a syringe in that blue box for him. Yeah. Oh, here's a med kit. Somebody.
Wingman, R99 here. Extended heavy mag here. Syringe.
Oh yeah, I have 0.
Yeah,
health
just
shields.
yeah.
Use that. And there's another box of some other fool that I smoked.
I hear another fast legs. I think maybe that's. Oh no, that's you. That's you.
I don't know where he went. I downed him over here. Then he said something like, "I'm a bitch. I'm gonna hide my box" or something. I found it. I found
Heavy
it.
ammo here.
It's right over here. Yeah, I definitely need the heavy.
Some.
Oh shit.
Oh, I need
Somebody-
one
here-
too.
here goes zero.
I'm just taking one box.
You hear it?
Yeah, somebody's being respawned.
Okay.
Oh, it's at the drill
There's a
site.
U site.
Close range. What do you think is
Damn, I got like no bullets. Fuck. Where was those?
Oh, they were
I
up
mean-
there. Yeah.
Alright, I got him.
In that box.
I have 92,
Oh,
and then I
took-
found them, so now I got 158. So
Oh,
I'm not
I
super
got
terrible.
way. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, here, somebody take this. Somebody take this big shield cell.
I'm taking the. Do you care if I take this other box too, Grim? Because I have way less.
What other box?
I've got like 85 rounds. So.
Oh, go ahead, take whatever.
light ammo here? Mira, found shotgun ammo.
I put light in some.
Yeah,
of the
I got a
boxes
bunch of
that
light.
You guys need.
I'm double heavy, but I'm okay now. I got 80.
Level 1.
I got a clip and a prowler and a clip and a Spitfire and 15 reserve rounds.
Oh, you better be on your game, son.
Ooh, this doesn't look looted. At least that's
Somebody was just brought back here.
unlooted bins. Wait, what is that? What is that? Is that
Yeah.
a person there?
There's
That thing
people
right
up at
there.
the.
Oh, on the towers, people.
Nice.
Dude, they're spread out in here, guys. They're spread out.
They're
Oh,
doing the
inside here.
bombard.
I'm with you, Zero. Oh, Zero. There's heavy bullets here.
Motherfucker's dead.
There's heavy bullets in that other room.
Oh, that's the way I like motherfuckers.
More guys coming in, Joe. Coming in the kitchen. Coming in
Dave.
the kitchen.
Zero. There's bullets out here,
shield.
Zero. Oh, in the front room. In the front room. They're down.
4 dudes.
Down another hoe ass bitch.
Yeah, I gotta heal up.
Yeah.
Zero. Grab that heavy before you run out.
Oh, one of them's got a gold shield. I got him. Oh, somebody else killed me.
All right, I'm healing
Somebody
up.
else killed me. I'm coming back in.
Oh, there's more than one person out there. another
Yeah, it's a
squad.
different squad. It's a
Fuck.
different squad. They're coming. They're running toward the door right now. He ran out.
There's 2 of them right here.
Oh, there's somebody coming in behind me.
Coming in those doors.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a
fuck,
first
man.
squad. Oh, man.
Damn, we always get that third party shit.
Yeah, yeah.
We
got
always
that
come in
hard
and
third
smoke one
party.
squad, and then while we're vulnerable, well, we smoked more than one squad. Now we smoked 2 squads.
Yeah. You guys want to play some ranks? See if we get
Yeah,
some
we can
boots
do
on the
that.
board?
Yeah, man. We got a good warm up. Good
Mhm.
warm bodies.
Nice and warm.
Actually, you guys keep warming up. I got a potty.
Okay.
Well, how long you gonna be? We can play regular shit instead. Whoops.
Yeah, yeah.
While you're warming up.
Well, I'm not warming up. You guys are still warming up.
Still haven't got your. Still haven't got your game.
Yeah, no. Well, I have a bucket.
Yeah, if you could just like make a shitting face while you're. People would enjoy that shit.
Let's see. I'll put on my potty time screen. All right, I'll be back. BRBs. I'm back. And I'm loud. There, this here. I stubbed my toes. Alright, I'm back. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I stubbed my toes in the hallway and they hurt.
His buddy, he got him up.
Is it? Where?
Yeah.
I got him. All right.
Our
I'm coming.
teammate killed one of them. Here's the other guy. Man, your foot is injury
Yeah, my
prone,
whole
dude.
life is accident prone. Hey, man.
And there's the third one.
I don't know how that guy. Okay.
Punish him, bro.
Hey, Zed, are you
Punish
still
him.
here in the
Yeah.
Chizat?
They killed your family.
They're behind the rock. Punisher, man. Punish that dude. He's right there.
I want to talk to you about the shirts, if you're here.
Make him punish
Oh,
for that shit, man. Oh, you got
Oh, he
him.
got him.
Oh,
I guess not.
Right there.
I was crawling around for the entire time.
Oh,
God
teammate.
damn, we
Oh,
can't get a
fuck.
break.
Fuck, God damn. 18 seconds. Oh, shit. Ah, the fucking Bernie stick got me.
Man,
Damn.
we get the worst fucking luck
if you don't get
in
me up
the
right now, I'm
universe.
gonna die from the fucking storm.
We get the absolute, and my banner is not recovered. You probably don't have time to recover it.
I can get it. I'm phoenixing up right now. Fuck. I'll get you instead of the body shield.
Just do what you feel. Okay, thanks.
I got
It
the
ain't a-
Rizzo.
Hell yeah.
This is like the second storm, right? Fuck, I only have like...
Yep.
Let's see, I reload my main gun, I have 24 fucking bullets, and then I have a wingman.
Oh, man.
Oh, I didn't have time to loot all those boxes. God damn.
Yeah, Joe, we just, like, knocked down,
It's the
like,
same
I guess
game.
2 squads,
I think.
and yeah, and then the storm comes in. There's no time to even
That
loot.
sucks.
Are you serious? Getting
Fucking
chased by a
teammate.
third squad?
Come on, bro.
That's suckaroonies.
Yeah,
Oh.
turbocharged energy gun. No fucking match for me.
Dude, you got... I can't believe we didn't do more damage than that with all that battling. That seems impossible. That's like insane. I didn't
Means
do
0
much at
to
all.
30
but-
damage combined, Joe.
Nice.
Like a salesman.
That's always good games when that happens.
Seriously, didn't y'all wipe like 2 squads?
No, it was
or
a lot
something?
more than that. It was like hundreds each, but still, it seemed like it was more damage. I didn't get any of the kills
like
for those.
Yeah,
I had
that's
283
crazy. You
damage.
guys were both battling.
Yeah, I just wasn't getting the last shots in.
Yeah.
All that shit's about to change.
Oh wait, so Black Friday's this Friday, right?
Oh yeah, guess so. Yeah.
What kind of good stuff is there to buy, like this year or whatever? Like, what's cool stuff?
I don't know. I usually look on Amazon shit when. Oh no, that was Prime Day. I was thinking of.
So I
But
know
you know,
they
you
have
got
deals on what?
Cyber Monday.
TVs.
They usually got deals on everything.
Yeah, all kinds
Depends
of
on what you got.
electronics. They get.
Oh,
They've
you
got
know
a-
what? That's what I need. I need a Bluetooth speaker for like
that'd be cool.
listening to music at my house. That's what I need. I keep trying to remember
You
things.
should
I
write
need.
it down because you're gonna
I'm so used to
forget
just not
about
buying
it.
stuff. I should.
I'm sure they make something like this, but they should definitely make like just a Bluetooth receiver that you can just plug a mini jack into and put any speaker you want to it.
Yeah, I think they have them.
I mean, because you could get a better, for the money of a, what is it?
I make this look good.
Bluetooth speaker.
His face. I mean, come on. You
Like something that's like a radio, but I can hook my phone up to a Bluetooth wires.
Yeah, just a Bluetooth receiver, yeah. And I mean, they do have them for your car. I'm sure they have them for your
Kim's
phone, too.
for her
Now,
car.
Cyber Monday, that's the Monday after Black Friday, right? Not
Right.
the one that passed?
Kim's the one in Kim's car has like a 3.5mm jack. I don't know if that is like
Yeah.
you then plug that in to do like what you're talking about, or that's another way to like plug the phone in.
Wait, the what?
And then the Bluetooth receiver.
her
The Bluetooth
audio
receiver thing in her car.
Oh, the
It's
receiver.
a
Yeah.
third-party Bluetooth receiver.
Yeah, so it has a 3.5mm jack.
So that's probably just
So-
so you could plug your phone right into that, and then
Well, you
have
Bluetooth
that
your
instead of
phone to it.
Bluetooth- Yeah, well, so I guess hers, instead of Bluetoothing, which is what she does now, you could just plug it straight in
Or it could.
No, you Bluetooth from your
Right,
phone.
so
yeah.
I don't know which way it works.
Well, yeah, that's what they do now, but there's the hole in case they want to do
Right,
it different.
but it might also be that you Bluetooth it to that and then you plug that into somewhere that has like a auxiliary input.
Somebody's in here. I'm gonna show them what the P2020 can really do.
You know what I mean? So that could be how it works.
I'm coming to you.
Yeah, I'm dead. 2020.
So I don't know, it was like $30 at Walmart. I don't know which way it
Oh,
works,
now he's
so
shooting the real meat.
so it would be a gamble to then not.
Yeah, I got a $10 one at Walmart, but its battery only lasted like 20 or 30 minutes. So
That sucks.
Oh, needed a battery? Wait, did you
no,
plug
it
it
was
to
a
cigarette lighter,
battery,
Joe?
but it was just a tiny.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's powered somewhere. I forget.
Yeah, that's the best
If-
kind. It's got a powered. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely not battery operated.
But yeah. Hey, if you guys ever want a good pair of stereos,
No,
go
I
ahead,
was
Joe.
just gonna say, but yeah, so I don't know which way if it can work both ways or if it can't work both ways. I mean, we've never used a 3.5mm jack, so I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, I heard
okay,
that
yeah.
you can get good stereo speakers from guys that drive around a
No,
white
it's
van.
actually the opposite of that. You get garbage speakers from that. You just pay the price of a good speaker.
But in the book, it says that they're like $50 million each.
And if you act now, you can get them for the low price of
this.
$1,000.
That Jay used to do that.
Yeah. You used to drive around and sell speakers out of the back of
I got
I
vans.
feel like the magazine sells it.
Yeah,
you know?
well, yeah, they spend a little bit of money on some publication for these no-name speakers, and then people believe it.
Yeah.
They've really thought the scam through.
Oh, what do you guys have a buddy that like builds speakers and acts
No,
like
no,
they're
no.
in-
It's a
what are you talking
real.
about?
Oh, you never saw
I don't think so. It's a real job, where it was a big thing. Like you'd see them all the time, all around Philly, years ago. I guess they still do it. Where you'd be at like a stoplight or getting gas, and all of a sudden a nondescript white van pulls in, and he's like, "Hey, buddy, you looking for a set of speakers for your house?" And while he's saying that, he's nodding yes. So subconsciously, you at least seem interested, and as soon as you show any kind of interest, boom, doors open, he's out, and he's talking to you about these fucking speakers. And then they show you the speakers, and it's like they're like big, like surround sound sets. They had like the big tower speakers, different stuff like that. And then if you have any doubt on the quality and why he's asking $1,000 for it, he pulls out a magazine that shows that they're worth $1,500.
But it's like
Yeah,
a fake
it's just like
magazine.
it's a magazine that has like some
I got a gold.
no-name bullshit on
like
it.
a bounce.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Speaker.
I got a red shield.
Speaker
Here's
yearly.
body shield. Alright,
I was.
I am.
I'm coming.
Got 2 guys.
Downed one.
Got 1 down.
Taken down.
Got the other full ass bitch.
Hell yeah.
This shit don't fly.
Shit,
Alright, I'm
another
coming
one.
to you now,
Third
Joe.
one. Third one.
too. Oh, the third one's here?
That one.
Oh, you got him?
Dead.
Alright, let me pick up some
Get
bullets or
fired,
something.
dude.
I only have 24. I probably need. Where's the other box? There's only 2.
2 more here. 2 more here somewhere. One guy probably didn't have.
Shit, I gotta
anything.
do damage with
see
shotguns, which
somebody
I
right
don't really want to do.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Ooh, you fool ass bitch. I told you don't come around here.
I am repairing myself.
I'm reloading.
Oh, I hear footsteps by me. Shit.
I don't know where his fuck
Alright.
is at, Grim.
I'm all out of bullets. Fucking cool guy gun. Oh, hold on. I do have another swing. Oh, somebody just hopped off the train right there.
Yep. He's right where you're jumping.
Bitch, get out of my town.
Shit, more people are landed on me.
Shit. Oh, I can't find any fucking bullets anywhere.
What kind of bullets do you need?
There's a
Heavy.
crate back here. Crate back here.
I
shotgun
need shield
bullet.
cells. Like, yes, bro.
Oh shit. I need
Here's
help.
cells, here's cells.
Oh, thank you.
I got stuff.
Here, I can drop some heavy
Stuff.
for you.
I dropped stuff there.
I hear somebody
Here,
jumping.
that's probably me. Here, 0. Take those 40 heavy bullets.
Heavy ammo here.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I need a light. I have energy. Who needs energy? I got 80 right here.
I got nothing but heavy. I got none. No extras. Here's a scout.
You need shield cells, Joe? Here.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah, he just dropped
Let's
shield
go get
cells.
your
I didn't get a
full
chance
stuff.
to use them yet. I'm using them now.
Oh. Well, that was all I had. But, more importantly, let's get these fools.
All right.
All right.
I'm hearing them.
Yeah, we're behind you, Grim.
Birdman just specialed. Birdman just died.
Yeah. I fucked both of them up. There
I
you
got
go.
the one of 'em.
Birdman dead. Oh, that
Yeah.
must be the last one. Here, you want to get me up? Yeah, I fucked up Birdman and then the other bitch, a little bit.
Oh,
he
shit,
didn't
he
actually
didn't.
get me up.
I let go
Are
of
you
the
trying
damn
to
thing
play
like
me?
97%.
You trying to play me, bro?
Gotta hop up here. Turbocharger.
What'd I do to you, man?
There's some light bullets in there.
Ammo here.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Oh,
There's
grab that purple
301.
shield, 0.
Somebody's getting revived or some shit.
Don't worry, it won't slow you down.
Oh, here I also have.
Here's a syringe.
That, if
Here's
anybody
couple
needs
shield
that.
cells.
I'm repairing myself. Standard
Uh,
level 2.
Here,
where's the
Grim,
other
you need
box
this.
at?
Oh,
There's
shit.
only 2
Yeah.
boxes here.
Yeah. There's some shits.
Yeah, somebody was just brought back, so we should go check that out.
Yeah, now I got 2 little.
Oh, here's
Oh,
another
here, I
box.
can drop-
Here's another box. There's nothing in it.
Yeah,
You got
yeah, I
extra
can drop you
shields,
some
either of
shield.
you?
Just weapons.
There you go.
Shield cell here.
Now I got 2 shield
You
cells.
just got brought back here. Oh, what's in this?
Shotgun
box?
stuff.
I think they got brought back.
Yeah, that was one of
gay.
the second person I killed. I think.
That box on the end. was there
Yeah,
when
yeah, I
ran
killed
out.
them when you guys were over here.
Oh,
Yeah.
you killed him earlier. Ah, okay.
Yeah,
don't
somebody
see
got
anybody
brought
here.
back here.
I
Yeah,
hear
that was a
grapple.
0.
Is that you?
That was me. Oh, I hear him. They're around here somewhere. Maybe that was Joe.
I thought I heard something. Oh, there's boxes
yeah,
over here. They're
care
probably over
package.
here looking at shit. Oh, the boxes are gone. Over here.
Must have
Over
came
here.
and looted
This
it.
door.
Yeah.
I'm grenading at them.
Got one.
Oh, I just did 105 damage with that grenade.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So are they dead, I guess?
Yeah,
One
they
guy
turned the
was.
boxes. I think you got the last guy.
Oh, I hear somebody. I hear somebody, guys.
There's
There's
some
a Watson
weird.
down. Watson down.
Okay, I'm coming, Zero.
All right, hold on.
Zero, you got a shield up.
I am
Do you not have shield
shielded.
cell, Zero?
Let's go. I'm coming.
I've only got a
Here,
battery.
take these. Alright, whatever.
Hold up.
We'll
hold
just
up.
take their shields then.
She's hurt more. There. Somebody got a
Take that
knockdown
helmet, Zero.
shield. Heavy rounds.
So this way you can get your grapple fast.
All right, I can't shield myself all the way up. I need light
There's a
bolts
knock-
really bad too. Okay, I got him now. Ooh.
Oh, we just got scanned.
Oh, it just got scanned.
Oh, buddy's here.
Oh, he's fucked up. He's fucked up. You guys should get him. He's the last one.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, more dudes from behind. From behind.
Dude, Eric, you keep fighting. I'll get myself up.
I got the
I'm
Guardian
dead.
Angel backpack, so this will give you health.
You're up here, Joe.
Alright, well, I gotta roll.
No,
out.
that just gave you
I'm
health.
fucking dead. Oh wait, yo, you got the Guardian Angel.
Shit, I gotta go. Oh no, those grenades are
You're
fucking me up.
detonated.
Yo, how many fucking grenades do they have? I gotta go and heal up.
Wow. I can't believe how quick he shot me out, put me out.
I'm healing up. Oh, there's people coming from behind us now. Motherfucker, man.
Oh my god, dude.
Oh man, I'm.
There's a squad coming up behind you.
Oh, you
Oh
downed it
shit.
too.
You guys fight each other.
Yeah, no shit.
They get them up.
Way to go, Grim.
Oh,
Yeah,
where's
come
the
on
other
down the
squad
tunnel,
though? Why
dickhead.
isn't the other squad coming to kill him?
You steered them off with your ferocity.
God damn it.
Now they'll probably come down and fight him.
Mm.
Dude, we were
Yeah, we
stomping
were.
kids' asses. Good damn,
Yeah,
y'all.
we're just wrecking people's days left
13
and right.
kills. 13 big kills. 4.33
Yeah, should have been another one. I
squads.
downed somebody else, but you know,
Yeah.
yeah, fuck that.
I can't believe that those kids were attacking us so aggressively, but they wouldn't come fight the kids
Yeah.
down the tunnel.
Yeah, I was waiting for them to fight so I could try to get myself up, but it never happened.
Yeah, I can't believe that shit. You were like evading them really well too. I'll be right back.
Alright.
And I gotta deal like 200 more damage with shotguns to get my dailies done. Need to score 120 rank points, so we should switch it to ranked.
Yeah, so when you're looking at your challenges, what's the one that says hashtag CH? Like pound CH?
Where you at? What week?
Like week 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, pound CH.
So you have a challenge in week 1, 2, 3, and 4 that say pound CH?
No, there's week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, week 8, and then under week 8 it says pound CH, and if you click on it,
Oh,
gives,
yeah,
like,
no,
some
it's
challenges.
mine says
You don't
week
have that?
9.
Maybe mine's just glitched. Maybe that's why it says that. So
Yeah,
it is a week
just
9.
started. I don't know when, but yeah,
Yeah.
it just started.
Well, week 9 makes more
Mhm,
sense
yeah.
than pound CH.
Yeah, that's why I was like, wait, what? I don't know what challenge that is. I've never done that challenge. God
back.
damn, took you long enough.
Okay.
You want to do ranked?
Oh yeah, I forgot
Sure.
about that. Ranked ass shit. Here we go.
So I gotta do. I need 120 rank points. I need to loot 5 neutral care packages. Get 15 more kills. Finish top 3 as Lifeline, Wraith, or Crypto. So let's do that this game. And I need a bunch of damage with assault rifles. And I need to land in Dome once.
What's
so
your,
let's do that.
What's your season 3 level?
80 or 81, something like that.
Yeah, I'm 76.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And if it's week 9, we're almost out of this season, I guess. So I need to hurry up and max out your battle pass.
Oh shit! So you need to finish it to get your money back, right?
Now you see me, now you don't. Now you see me, boom, you're dead.
You know that. I'll be right back.
We have no choice but to
Time to destroy more opponents.
0. Never mind. Never mind. I was gonna say, pick your guys so Grim doesn't wind up being jump master, because I didn't pick mine.
Oh yeah,
But-
yeah. I did.
Okay, yeah.
I did
But
pick it.
looked like time ran out before I
no time.
could say anything, so. It tis what it tis. It's tits or it's tits. So wherever you want to go, Mr. Zero. Oh, actually, the Dome. I gotta land in Dome. If we can land in Dome, that would be swell. That'll give me one of my
Sounds
challenges for this week done.
Good.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back.
Here we go. It's a long drive. Fun.
The Dome.
Where we going?
I gotta land there for a challenge.
The Doom.
Oh, we're going to hell.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm going to hell, and who's coming with me? That's not the same at all.
First blood
I'm gonna hook right over here.
Alright, I'm gonna hook wrong over here. We got somebody landing right in front of a 0.
Yeah.
Oh, are you kidding me?
Who wants smoke?
He just shot past you and fucking killed
Damn,
me.
oh, you went the other side?
Beginning ring countdown.
Shit. Alright. Oh,
Oh,
man.
he's almost dead,
I'm-
dude. He is hurt real bad.
hostile right
I'm
here.
coming.
Contact.
All I saw was a P. Here he is on me. Nice.
Reloading. Downed an enemy.
There's a P2020 there. That's the only gun I saw.
I took care of it, don't worry.
Oh, good.
You got me.
Somebody's coming. I need that med
There's
kit.
somebody else.
I guess.
Shots fired and they're hitting me.
Oh, I climbed up and just got murdered. Don't climb up.
I got a P2020 and no health.
Don't run away then. I'll crawl really far. How many points you get per kill?
10.
2 billion.
Costs like 25 to enter. 24 to enter.
24. Alright, alright, alright. You guys seem all sad now. We got this. You guys, am I muted? Hello.
Oh no. Yeah. We got this. We got this.
Yeah. What about you, Joe? Where's your high
I
school,
left it
bro?
at the train station.
Stop being all sad, guys. What the fuck? We die one time and you're like, I'm sad.
Nobody's sad.
I lost points too. Well, you guys are literally like not answering. For the
It's because I
first
thought
time.
it'd be funny
Well,
when you're
no.
like, "Am I muted?"
Got all
And then
super
I'm like,
quiet.
"Well, of course, let's." And then Zero out of Rona, like, "No, you're. Yep, nope, yeah, let's get it." Like, damn it, Zero.
Well, I said that after a while of no responses. Damn it, Zero.
Starts like you start like disassembling your fucking controller and shit.
There's got to be a problem with this somewhere.
This is going to be fun. Listen, I've been training all day, so it's about time we do some fighting.
This is your champion. Oh, champion's gold 1. He's got a gold 1 on his team as well.
Damn, homie.
Oh yeah. Tear it up.
Oh yeah, right on our home turf. That's how I know we're gonna fuck it up. Gonna
I'm
run
gonna
back the last game.
I'm gonna land low this time. See what's up in this.
Joe, are you not? Oh, you are. Okay. You landing on the ground?
Yeah.
Yeah. See what's up down here in the slums.
Ooh, flatline to start. Yeah, I feel some lucky shit coming on.
Yeah, right past you there, Joe. There's one out in the field too.
All right, I'm coming, you guys. Right here.
Enemy down.
First blood on the enemy. I am repairing myself. Opening fire.
57 on this bitch.
Killed an enemy.
That's a good kill.
Yeah, there's a few people out there.
All right.
There's at least 2 people out there.
Reloading.
I need energy bullets if we see some. I just got the 48 that's in my gun. I got light,
I've got
so I'm okay.
very
You
low
wanna chase
ammo,
these
but
bitches?
Sure. Whatever.
Someone there.
I'm with you. I don't have much ammo. We'll see
There was
what
a
happens.
fast guy that I fucked up for, what I say, 57 or something.
I don't know, he could have healed by now. It's been a
Yeah, he
minute.
definitely could have.
Taking a quick shower and then I'm going to bed.
We're the wrecking squad,
Okay.
bro.
Opie's in there. I don't think he got enough energy.
I don't
I
know where
don't
they went.
try it.
Wait. Oh, someone was through here.
And then the
Oh, there's
timing
people right there.
thing,
Right.
This fucking spray bottle seems to be broken. Like there's that much cayenne pepper in it.
Okay.
But when like I actually try to smell it, then what's spraying
Bitch, fuck out of my house, ho.
this is like broken.
Oh,
It's
this
just
dude's
what's
fucked up.
spraying.
Oh, he's running away.
Yeah, I don't know.
Shield of- Oh goddamn! There's 2 up here. I broke one.
Oh, look at
It's
that.
out of conclusion from that him.
Yeah.
Nice, one left back there. Oh,
Hell yeah.
Get out of here, get out of here. Do whatever you do. I'll tell
I'm
you
dead.
who's healing up.
I had like a half a health.
Oh, good damage.
Good damage. And Joe's the only killer on the squad.
Only killer. Oh, I unlocked something and fucking skipped off the screen before
You
I could see what it
unlock
was.
the AIDS. So I gotta play with a shotgun this game. I need to get like 200, no, 120 more damage from daily.
So turns out, Zero, I still need 2 more lava fisher knockdowns. Remember we were talking about the fisher?
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know if that's another
uh,
challenge or what. Because remember last time we were there? I don't know. I just know I've been fucking shit up there quite a few games, and I'm only 2 out of 4 knockdowns
yeah, it
there.
seems like maybe I don't, because
Or maybe it was the other day. I was playing with other people, and I think we killed like every squad there.
Was that not where we landed earlier tonight? All 3 of us. And
Yeah,
like,
we landed there tonight. Yeah. Maybe the very last time we might have landed by ourselves.
Yeah, but
I
was
know
that where we
today-
were at in that big battle?
I got knocked
And
out.
I know what you're looking for.
yeah,
I'm in.
maybe it wasn't. I know it was a lava-filled place. I don't know if it was fissure or if it was dome or what, but I know we got some knockdowns. And
Oh, no.
This time.
So, Joe, do you have all your weekly shit completed? Like all
No.
7 out of 7? Or at least the battle pass level 1 stuff?
No, not on most of them. Not on week 9. I don't. And I don't think I have them all done on week 8 either.
But all the other ones you got at least the
I
battle
think
pass
so.
level ones? Who's thirsty for some bitch blood?
oh, I thought I had a Wayne Mang, but it was a Mozambique.
Body shield here. Level 1.
I was just about to shoot that. I was about to go through.
Shotgun bolt here. Level 2.
How did I get an empty? Oh, I got hit. I need shield cells if anybody sees them. Oh, dude's over here.
Okay.
Shit. I'm coming. Up, they're running up the steps there. Alright, I'm gonna run up these steps. Catch them.
I'll meet him from the roof.
Taking fire, friends. Enemy down.
Down one of them.
You got them on the way? Nice.
Yep.
Reloading. Enemy killed. I took care of it. Don't worry.
Shit.
First blood. Good work.
Gotta hop up here. Choke.
I need a bag and stuff.
Gotta hop up here.
Champion out. I am taking fire.
Oh shit.
Oh,
Getting shot again.
I missed it on yellow. Oh, shit.
Getting shot from outside. Getting shot from outside. I was down low.
Giving my shield.
Where are you? Oh, shit.
From
That's
south.
where they're at. Okay.
Faking him out with a decoy.
Enemy shield cells. Only have 41 light ammo.
I'm back.
Yeah, I
keep
have
it
less
on.
than that. I have 20 extra light and 20 extra heavy. That's all.
Oh yeah, they're in.
Actually, I'm
building
switching to a
over
wingman just for that.
Did they blow up my ball?
Oh, they just
Ball out.
smoked from
For no
like up
reason,
top
Jack.
somewhere. I just got scanned. I don't know. I'm not
Yep.
I'm not
They just
equipped
dropped
for this fight.
Shit.
Shooting at me.
I'm
Where the fuck
down.
Are they shooting through a hole in the ceiling or
In
what?
this area. No, they're
Oh,
one
they're
was
right back
down
here
low
by this.
anyway.
I hear those footsteps.
Bitch.
1 second. We got this.
Fuck with my homies. Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, you're getting them up. Okay. Oh man, yeah. Somebody
Nice.
but I finished them
Got
off.
one.
There we go. That's the last one.
Hold on.
Oh, nice.
Alright, I have 0 fucking heals, and I had dropped my blue shield
You are wonderful.
for a white one. So I didn't have any fucking healing shit.
I am repairing myself.
There's cells in there too.
Hang on.
Actually, I'm gonna drop this Phoenix kit because I mean I didn't do no work.
No,
there.
but you could use it. It would actually do the most benefit for you. Yeah.
All right.
I didn't get the. Anybody have health?
Yeah, I have 2
syringes.
syringes too.
Syringe
But
here.
yeah, then that's all I got. I need cool body shield.
Oh, you guys are charged.
Something cool. Yeah, I dropped the Spitfire for a wingman because I only had 20 bullets.
Using grapple.
Now I have more bullets.
You need heavy?
Nah, I got heavy too now. I can grab that Spitfire. Or if I can find a heavy clip, I could stick with this Prowler. Or
This side's all looted up
wingman.
top.
That's what I meant to say. Alright, I just found a 301, so I'm okay for now.
Gotta hop up here. Gotta hop up here. Joke.
Care package coming in. Havoc here. Got an extended energy mag here. Level 3. Gotta hop up here.
Who said they needed a heavy mag?
Alright, here we go. I could use one. What color is it? It's blue.
I could use a flatline for show.
I need it.
You see one of them
Oh,
mofos? I'll
actually,
definitely
cancel that. I
use
just found a
Shit.
99, so I'm gonna do that. So I'm getting rid of my wingman
So it's like
and all my heavy.
Taking a break, just watching this spot.
these couple things are looted, but these bins aren't. Oh, shit, we're all spread
Blue
out.
body shield over here, Joe. I threw a zip line to
Okay,
get to it.
thank you.
I need it.
Oh, actually, there's a
Yeah.
hemlock here. I'll take.
Optics here. Holster in stock here.
You saw.
I'll take this hemlock.
Heavy ammo here.
Or no, I'll take this Spitfire.
Oh, you say? Where's that? Who is pinging that?
R301
Me.
here. Yeah, I could use that.
I threw a zip line over
Oh, where was there a
That was over. It was in a
here.
box.
I haven't seen a.
Yeah.
It's in a box?
Yo,
Yeah,
Joe, check
I'm
this
gonna
zip.
ping this prowler for him real quick. I think it was right here.
Okay.
Right there.
Prowler SMG here.
Alright, here's a big shield cell and a 2X.
Actually, I'm gonna take that 99. There's that
Oh, you found
301
the
over
prowler.
there, though.
Oh, shit. Nice. Thank you. Oh, I didn't ping in time. Disappeared. People are over there. People just opened that door over there.
Oh, okay.
Oh shit! Now that I got a Spitfire. Oh, yep, they're shooting at me.
There's more than one spot, I think. Where was
It's in this
prowler?
box right here.
Let's explore this way.
Yep, I'm going for 0.
Oh, god damn, how'd he kill me? I busted that guy's shield. There's 2 guys.
Oh, yeah, they're
down
fucking
at
me
the
up.
door,
Reloading.
Right there.
Oh, and I'm fucking dead.
I'm down.
Ah, so many motherfuckers.
Ah! Stop following me.
Give him my shield to recharge.
Alright, so I just got a notification from Facebook that they received my. They've reviewed my request and my ad is scheduled or running. So, my ad's running now.
Okay.
So, yay!
We are sorry, our robots
Yeah.
misjudged you.
It's like, did you think it was real life? You think I was really jumping fences and shooting people with like laser beams?
Yeah.
No, that's not what I want. Put it on. Yeah. Fuck. Alright, who's going down first? Zero? You're both close.
I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think I can do this. Let's take down the roof. No! Oh, what the, yo, I hit my gun button 2 times.
Damn.
Oh, I get out so fucking dead. God damn it.
Yeah, I don't understand. I was hitting this guy with a 99, and I got like 90 something damage on him, and he did like 100 and I don't know. Well, is closer to 200 than 100 probably, with the 99 in the same amount of time, and I was hitting my shots good, dude. I don't fucking get it. Maybe he had a big clip, and I ran it. I don't know, man.
man.
Could have been
Pissed me off.
headshots too. Headshots are
It could have been
game
headshots.
changer.
Wait, so you guys watch my screen? Was my gun out before I grabbed the banner? Or not?
I
I
don't
saw you
know.
punch. I don't know. I can't remember.
Yeah. All I know is I got the thing, then I sent a decoy and pulled the banner up. It seemed like, or I pulled my gun out. It seemed like no decoy came out. and then I punched. So then I hit the gun button, and then I hit the shoot button again, and then it punched again. So it was like it didn't even fucking.
Oh, I thought I saw you fire at the very end. I don't know.
Well, I did,
Like
but I
right
think
before
I think I punched 2 times first, didn't I?
Oh, maybe so. Maybe so. I'm not sure.
Eventually, the gun came out for like 1 bullet before I died or something, but. I probably should have fought those dudes and then tried to go for the boxes. Well, at least we came in 10th place, so we got some points for that shit.
Oh, did we? I didn't even notice.
Yeah. You got 10 points just for coming in 10th.
Oh, good. So I lost 14 points instead of 24.
Well, did you have an
No.
assist? Because that would give you points too. No. I lost 2 points. I had 1 kill. So I lost 2. Wait, how many points you get for a kill? 12 or 10?
It's 10 until you reach top 10, then I think it's 12.
Okay. So I was going to say, I thought it was 10. And I definitely just noticed that it was 10 for top 10. So I was like, how do I only lose 2 points? Wouldn't that be 4 points lost?
Introducing your champion.
Frank the Tank. You see that?
No, I missed it.
Oh no, I didn't see his name.
Yeah, that was somebody on the champion squad. Alright. You guys feeling lucky about this? I am. I feel like this is a lucky joint. We gonna make some fools. Shaking fools, breaking rules. The Death Squad is dropping on the ice cannon or whatever this shit is called. Yeah.
The ice cannon, definitely the ice cannon.
Now, this is Mozambique. I'm not even gonna pick that shit up. It's not even really a gun.
I got one. I got a Mozambique as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, I left it for whoever landed up there. I got guns now.
Actually, right there.
I have just the charge rifle.
Get out of here, ho.
First blood.
I don't know how many squads landed with us.
Oh my god. God damn, that was way too close. Oh, I'm dead. You around here, Joe? I'm getting murdered.
Yeah, I have its charge rifle.
Oh, I'm still getting murdered. I'm still just having another beak in that. Wow, it's only 2 people there.
Oh, double or triple shot. That was ugly. Man.
Yeah.
Damn.
Rough.
Thanks.
Oh, I started 12 points up, boys.
Oh shit.
Don't let it go any longer.
I'm still up 108, but I've been losing every game so far.
Wow, you're 108. You're like a fucking. You're flying high, man.
I'm flying high, man. Wow. So I have like 3 more games until I'm 0.
Maybe I should not be a character with a bigger hitbox.
Who are you playing as?
Pathfinder. Either, yeah. Oh, he's not got bigger hitbox, but he's got that damage debuff.
Ah, yeah. It's so hard to hit.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I straight up, I recorded footage of like, I was like, I swear I shot this dude. And none of the bullets landed. It was going like through a little hole between like his arm and his body. Like every single shot.
Oh, no
Like,
kidding.
what? Yeah,
Was
I
that a
tried to watch it
Pathfinder?
back. Yeah, it was a Pathfinder.
Oh,
I was like, how did
okay.
none of those shots land? And it was going between his arm and his body. I was back in like season 1 landing spot shit.
Yeah, I've been like sweeping at kids with a Spitfire, and they run right through the stream of bullets and don't get hit. And I'm just like, what the fuck? It's that same deal.
Gonna
I'm
land
sure.
the main thing?
Yeah,
or
yeah,
what?
right in the center.
All right.
I'm gonna land like over here.
We got at least 2 people landing right in front of me.
Oh, there's like this wall ass shit.
Oh, and they got a gun and I didn't.
Damn, all that shit's got me screwed up. Oh shit.
Yeah, some bitch opened the bin, so I was like, punch, and just jumped it, knocked her out of the way.
That's my nade.
Oh, I got 2 people on me. Mother.
I got one. Fuck, man, so
I'm
bullets.
trying to find a gun.
I only have 24 bullets left.
I got my fists.
Alright, just relax. I got everything under control.
Are you fucking kidding me? Not a Mozambique. Oh my gosh. All right, got a
I
wang,
have
mate.
no heals,
Come back to
nothing.
you. Maybe
Yeah,
you
I'm
guys should
leaving.
come
I'm out of
here.
here.
I have 2 syringes.
Oh shit, I'm
I'm
coming
I'm
here.
going to look for stuff. I don't have anything. I have 15 bullets, no shield, no heals, no grenades.
Alright, they're right here, but they're banged up. They're running away.
Fuck.
They're shielding up.
Oh my god, I'm terrible. Gotcha, bitch. Fuck! Fuck, fuck, fuck! Teammates coming.
Oh, what is that grenade? What the fuck?
Someone's got a
As
shot.
I'm falling, a grenade
kid
drops
right
on the
here.
ground right where I fucking land. There's nobody near me. Why would somebody throw a grenade there? It doesn't make sense. Oh, it doesn't matter anyway.
It may have been because. Oh no, I wasn't next to you, was I? Never mind. Oh, I got a kill.
Sweet.
You guys got enough damage for a kill. Yeah, no, match quality survey. That match pissed me off. I'm hitting X for the first time.
I
Suck it.
loved it, man. Oh, for the
Yeah.
first time you said you didn't like it?
Well,
So you liked
I
all
don't
the other
know.
short
I don't know
ass
if it was really the
fucked
first
up
time,
ones?
but I usually don't like say no because it was just a bad,
Right.
a bad game because it's just
It's
like,
not the game's
I mean,
fault, it's
not
my
the game's
fault.
fault.
But
But that
feel
time
like
I was like, fuck it.
you only get those surveys when it's a real fast beginning. And you
Yeah,
don't
that's
do good,
true.
I feel like. Whenever
Yeah,
I do
maybe-
good and I'm gonna drop and die fast, I don't get them. I only get them when it's like something angering happens.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the way it is with me too.
Scout.
Spent gunpowder.
Either you're with me
Smells
or
like
you're against
victory.
me, or you're with me and against me, because, I'll be honest, that
The
happens.
Bangalor's best weapon is the Scout. Mirages, I think it's actually the RE45. No. Wingman? What is he pictured with? The Wingman?
Yeah, I think so.
What do you mean by their best weapon?
Nah, I mean, I'm just talking shit. But like,
Oh yeah, just in as part of the
her
character.
picture, she's carrying it. So you think that
Okay,
Bangor would be the
yeah.
Scout. Mirage is carrying the Wingman as picture. But in his, I have a loading screen of like his room or something, and he has like a trophy of 2 RE45s.
Oh, okay.
Alright. Nice calm landing somewhere.
I've got a trophy of a
About
40 of Colt 45.
I mean, that is trophy material right there.
Straight up trophy shit.
That should be their slogan.
0 hours got a trophy of us. Oh shit, I missed. Yeah, I got it.
No gun.
Oh,
is this a bad guy I'm with? What the fuck?
Fuck yeah, he grabbed the purple thing,
Oh god, I have no gun.
and their gas is
fell
fucking me
off.
up. Yeah, crawl off zero.
I'm down and off. Fuck.
Oh,
man.
Joe's got our backs.
Should've seen that
Oh
coming.
no. Oh
Hold on.
yeah, keep chugging away, train. You stay on that
Chug
train,
it, chug
you
it.
bitches. Hey, I'm right here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sick of these shitty games. I don't think I got many more in me.
We need them
Oh, the
heals.
train's stopping over there.
Thanks. Good looking out.
Yeah, I'm getting tired too. I got 1 or 2 more or something.
Let's go this way.
I thought I would have got both the
Body
guns.
shield here. Level
None of that crazy shit would have happened if I would have got the guns like a real fucking
backpack here. Level 2.
player. I got 2 blue shits for you.
One sec.
Need some shield cells.
Oh yeah. I didn't realize what you meant for a sec. Are you getting shot? Oh, it's somebody else. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I got a triple take.
I got a Mozambique. I just picked up an alternator, so.
You're on this bitch. Oh wait, stop healing yourself. There's that shit.
Oh damn,
Got
too
the
late.
scout, too?
Well, I'm gonna take it because there's
Well, I mean, if you
syringe
need
over
it,
there.
take it.
Yeah, might as well have 100 shields.
I don't have any shield cells, so if
Mozambique
you
here.
find some, I could use some.
Here's some.
Cool.
Shit, I gotta do damage
And a
with
hat,
shotguns.
and an energy
Actually, I'm
thing.
gonna pick this back up, I guess.
Havoc here. I could use that.
Are you
I don't know
getting
if
shot,
people are
Grim?
fighting my building
coming
or
to you.
Oh
beyond.
no, I don't need that
Not.
that blue heavy mag. I can't. I'm paying
Go
now.
this way.
Blue heavy mag, I could use it when I get a heavy
It's
gun.
on the second
Yeah.
level of that shit we were in there. That's building we were just
Alright.
in.
Is that you I'm hearing?
1
Okay,
minute.
probably.
Ring's not far.
Yeah, I think so.
If we see like a peacekeeper or
At
something.
the moment, I am
some
double
sort of shotgun.
light.
I got a Mozambique, but it's not the
You want
shotgun.
a shotty? Oh, cause you
Yeah.
do shit with it, is what you say?
Yeah.
Alright, I'm
Purple
going back for
energy
that
mag.
mag.
Okay. It's on the second floor, I think. Of
Yeah, I can see it. I thought it got
Somebody's
Yeah.
here.
dropped or something, so I didn't think I'd be able to see it. But...
okay, I'm with you, Joe.
Alright, I'm coming.
He ran back out.
Recharging my shield.
He's trying to.
I'm on
us
the
or
roof.
Something, Joe.
Somebody's on the roof. A bunch of motherfuckers. Yeah.
Shit.
Oh yep. Oh there. Yep.
Yeah.
They were like literally on each other's back the entire time they were fighting us, just about.
Yeah, when I heard somebody, 2 people popped up. Maybe
Did you
even
spec
3.
them when they came down the stairs, Grim? Were you already out in spectator
I,
mode? Like,
no. I
They
was,
ran
like,
down the
instantly
stairs.
Dead. I got
All
down
3
and then
together.
like 1 shot killed. They like headshotted me with the wingman or something. While I was down. And I
yeah, they were
instantly
like
came into the box.
attached. They were attached by like a half dog leash to each other. I mean, they came down like Siamese triplets, fucking ready to kill. On the plus side, I think I fired my R99 toward their heads, but it's not quite enough. when there's
I
3
shot
of them.
some sort of gun in the general direction of their heads, but it didn't quite make the cut.
It'll be a Gibraltar.
To be the best. I worked for it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so bored. It's time. Sarkata.
This is your champion.
Get ready for a light show.
All right.
Anyone want to take me out? Come find me.
Yeah, I had to drop some shit off at the dry cleaners today. I might have mentioned this the other night. I know I'll repeat myself sometime. But like, I saw this shit. You guys ever watch Rift Tracks or MST3K
No.
or anything?
Never even heard of it.
Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That shit
I
was
know what
around
it
when
is.
we were kids.
No,
Yeah,
I
well
never
anyway,
watched it,
it just makes
yeah.
fun of, they make
Movies,
fun of old
yeah.
movies
It's like
and shit. Yeah.
there's some dude and a
It's-
couple robots sitting in the
Yeah,
front row
it's
movies,
hilarious shit.
talking trash
And
on it.
Rift Tracks is the same guys, but they just don't play a character. They just do it, you know. Shit's hilarious if you ever want to watch it. It's on Amazon Prime. Rift Tracks is, but and
Somebody's in
MST3K
there.
is on Netflix. I'll tell you in a second.
How do I miss that entire fucking clip? Are you kidding me?
I'm coming.
Yeah.
I'm with you, Joe.
I dropped down.
Wait,
Grim
who's
is
getting
now.
shot?
Oh, I forgot who I was playing as.
Okay,
got him.
can't even fucking.
Got his bitch ass for you, Joe. Don't shoot my friend.
Shit. Nice.
There goes the first.
Alright, where's that dude
Well,
down?
ammo. There we go.
Probably hiding in here somewhere.
Oh, in here somewhere. Oh, that's you. Okay.
Yeah, I found a bitch ass.
Here's a dude.
There's 2 bodies here.
I'm
Broke
coming.
shield. Oh, he's almost down. Yep. Hell
Got
yeah.
that food. Fuck that two ass bitch. What, shotgun ammo? Where's my other gun? Fucking go gun. What's going on here? I still need a vest and shit. I need a vest.
I pinged a bunch of them.
Need something.
Yeah.
Did you? I was fighting. My bad. My bad, bruh.
Yeah, they're down like by the respawn.
What else I got?
There's like 4 or
Energy
5
clip?
down by the respawn. I can help you. Are you okay, babe?
Yeah. Oh, there's one right here. Is there any better than white?
No. No.
Good question. Nothing's better than white.
Ooh, here's a. I'm gonna drop a 301 for somebody. Oh no, here it is. Okay, yeah.
I just found one.
Okay, come take it, Joe.
There's a
I got a
bag
flat
somewhere
line,
in
so
that shit.
oh, I'm taking it.
Havoc here.
I mean, if you want it,
What
you
am
can
I?
have it. I got an alternator
What am
flat
I
line.
taking? I'm
301.
good. I could use some ammo.
Do it.
I got like 70 light.
No. What do you need? I got some lights.
Better stabilize here. Light ammo.
Here's 40.
Shotgun bolt here.
I can use that too for my peacekeeper.
Can you not heal
Yeah, I
yourself,
can.
Joe?
I will once I get here.
Just don't feel like it. Somebody came through here already.
Give me a second. Fixing up.
Yeah, it looks pretty barren up here.
There ain't shit here at all. Where you guys want to go?
Yeah, we go through the train
Wanna
tunnel.
go through
or
the
to
train
Capital
tunnel?
City.
See what happens over there?
What do you think is over here?
Sure, sure. Little lot ammo in here.
Light ammo here.
I hear some shooting somewhere. I don't know where that is.
Ready, set, go.
I
other
think
side
it's
of
on
the
the other
tunnel,
side
I
of the
think.
tunnel.
Care package being delivered.
Energy ammo
Triple
here.
take. And then
Yo,
the
check
ammos.
out that care package. Syringe here. Hemlock here.
A lock of hems.
RE-45 here.
There's a care package.
Oh, it's a medic care package, yeah.
Where?
Uh,
Target spotted.
Over there.
oh, maybe it's not a medic care package. That's a
Oh,
regular
I
one.
thought
But
that
anyway,
was a zip
still
line.
people.
Throwing jump pad.
Still, there are people.
And I like to kill the people.
Oh yeah.
People ain't nothing but bitch holes for me to shove my peacekeeper in.
A bitch of hose.
Mhm.
Shooting at me.
Oh man!
Charging. Must go faster.
What up, Grim? Where
I
you
am
getting
not
shot from?
Mirage. Over there.
Is it
somewhere.
from there? Okay.
Using meds.
It's Mirage. I think I'm like sending.
Alright, hold on, I'm
decoys
gonna
up
send
the
my
edge there
drone
and just,
out.
like subtracting health while I'm
Um,
standing here.
Oh yeah, I just saw one run to the right in there. You gonna EMP them bitches?
If I find them, I can.
Somebody's all the way
Damn.
back there. They're running
Bitches.
like up. Yeah, they definitely probably all ran away.
Countdown.
Chua, we're already in the ring.
Did it
Yeah,
find
it sounded
somebody?
like it. I think they're in this.
Yeah, I didn't
Yep,
see
right
where
here.
Let's move.
There's 2 squads fighting in here.
Oh okay. Oh shit!
all happening.
I'm getting
Oh,
fucked
shit,
up
where are
right
you?
here. Behind us.
Right
Behind
here?
us. Behind us.
I'm back.
In this building right here.
Only you and me now.
It's one job.
Another one's zipping over. They're on the roof. And there's. He's behind you, Grim. Mm.
Oh shit.
Oh damn, Grim. There's like 1 or 2 health.
Probably like 0.5 health or some shit.
Yeah.
That was not good.
Boys, you want to play
Yeah, I can do one
more?
more.
Whatever you're feeling.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I
if
was
you're
just
done,
about
you're
to
done.
say I'm done, but I can do one more.
All right. That's what I was thinking. Just one more. And
That was very
throw the
frustrating.
rest. Yeah, we were very close to fucking positive points on that, but 2 more squads needed to die or something.
Motherfucking more squads. Didn't die.
Then we would have been at notch 1.
Oh, so Joe, are you definitely going out with your half brother
No.
and your brother, or what?
No, it's not a definite yet.
It's only tomorrow. So how did it come about?
He reached out to my brother and asked my brother if he wanted to get some drinks.
Oh, yes, your brother, but not you. What a
Yeah.
dick.
So my brother asked me if I was interested, if I would go, and I said, yeah, I'd go. Sure. So, and then he was gonna talk to him, and then.
So what?
Well, if
did
that
his-
happens, do you want it to just be you,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
guys?
Well, yeah, it's gonna be somewhere in like Lancaster or
So
something.
you
It's
can-
not gonna be anywhere around here.
Oh, all the way
Yeah.
up by him. You make him come out here. Fuck that.
There'd be like more brothers on this side, biatch. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, it's true.
Did his dad raise
Nah,
him?
my mom put him up for adoption. Yeah, I don't even know who his dad is. He has a whole bunch of paperwork he was able to find, so he might know. I don't know. I don't know if my mom ever told anybody who the dad was.
So did he just find out recently? Or
I don't
for a
know.
while?
It's been like 2 years or 18 months or something since we've known. Maybe a year ago. I forget when he told us.
But I mean, it's not like you found out when he was 18 and knew the whole time, right?
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
I'm the jump master.
How you going, Mr. Joe? The Fishers?
Sure, yeah, go to Fisher for something, so we'll do that.
Flaming hot magma.
So if you don't do the brother thing tomorrow, Greavy said, he definitely wants to
Yeah, I
do
saw
something
that.
tomorrow. Some people from my work, said they want to do something, so there's
Dude.
definitely something to do tomorrow if you want to.
What is the real name of someone with the nickname Greavy?
Daniel.
Greavy. Huh.
Oh, what the fuck is it?
That
What
is
the fuck
really
does
his
That's his
Greavy
last
come
name.
from? Oh, Greavy. Okay, I don't know if I've ever heard that.
Yeah, well, yeah,
name
he's.
before. It's like Irish
I
or
don't
something.
know. I think it's.
Wow,
Oh,
that
shit.
dude just
I think
fucked me
it's
up.
avian.
0?
Over here. Yeah.
Unacceptable. You're not gonna pick up the
Yeah, I was
burn?
trying
Pick
to.
up.
I didn't have. I had to empty something.
God.
Kill him? Oh, my bad. My bad. Oh, man.
I got him. Got you, bitch. Thought you were bad. You weren't bad.
I need a body shield, so.
How's that fucking going through him? That's bullshit. I'm glad this is the last game.
Yeah, sometimes. Some days.
Oh, wait. Duh, I didn't know I had big shields all the time. Here, there's a big one.
okay.
You guys use fake one.
Hide. Watch out. Watch out.
I'm a dummy.
Here's a couple
I
of
didn't even fucking
syringes.
know I had them.
Recharging.
Joe, here's the syringe.
Okay, thank you.
Where they at? You know where they at?
There was one like over here a minute ago.
They're in here.
Oh,
Probably
okay,
on the
I'm
roof
coming.
here.
Oh, I hear somebody around me too, I think, but I'm still
Yeah,
coming.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
climbing
Yeah,
up
yeah,
the
they're
roof.
down low. Yeah, they're climbing on the. Now they drop back down.
Oh, I did 75
Two just dropped
damage
down.
on
Two
that
just
hoe.
dropped down.
Oh, he's here on the.
Two
God
dropped down
damn it.
over here, Grim.
Alright, it's been
Damn,
fun.
they're fast. Yeah, hold up, Joe. We might come in and shit on these kids. Oh, there's another
Yeah.
squad. Oh my God.
Yeah, if two just dropped down. I think the other bitch is
Dude,
disappeared though.
yeah.
Oh, what
They
the
were
hell?
stomping
what is
at
going
me.
on there? All right, you want to push these hoes?
Yeah, I don't even know where they're at, but yeah. Shit.
Not much time. Rings far.
This guy's hurt bad.
Ya bitch. All right.
Now there's.
Oh, somebody's
yeah,
getting
there's
him up too.
people
I think they just ziplined. Sorry, he was just the closest one after I killed that guy.
Yeah, I hear somebody else zipping. Oh my God! Here he is.
Ping him, keep pinging him. Oh, never mind. Oh, fuck.
I couldn't.
Shoot me or let go. Damn.
I was on one side of the rock. He was on the other.
Oh.
Alright, gents. It's been real.
Yeah,
James.
Yeah, good games, good games. We had a few good ones
Yeah,
there
it was
for
good in
real.
the beginning,
We
but
had some
it
kills.
turned to some
good
shit later
demos.
on. Alright.
Yeah, it left an aftertaste of the shit. But
Okay. Yeah, I'm done here. I'm logging off.
all right,
Anyway.
see you guys. I'll probably
All
go
right.
tomorrow or something.
Adios, fellas. I'll talk to you.
See y'all.
I'll see you guys
Adios.
later.
The one night you don't have work, you get off from
Yeah. Okay.
so yeah, I get up at
Hold on.
8 just to see if there's gonna be
Alright, I want to say thank you to everybody that came out. I know it was a surprise stream. Wasn't planning on it, but I'm possibly not streaming the rest of the week. I don't know. I got some things that might happen tomorrow, and then don't know if I'm going to feel like I'm up to it on Thanksgiving. And then there was talk about something happening on Friday as well. So yeah, I don't know. I figured I would get it in. But yeah, I want to say thanks to everybody who came out. Whether it was Facebook, Twitch, Mixer, YouTube, I appreciate it. Means everything to me, especially those who stopped by when I wasn't supposed to be on. And also I want to say thanks for all the engagement I get on the socials, especially on Instagram. It's Mechanic on all socials except Twitter. It's Mechanic G. Also go follow Zero Logic Gaming on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, so thank you to everybody who stopped by. To those who didn't stop, also want to thank Grim for the games. I want to thank Zero for the games. Definitely, it was a lot of fun early on, and then it just turned to shit later. So I was enjoying myself, and I can feel that that's obvious. So I should have got off sooner. But who wants to watch a cranky guy? So anyway, yeah, thank you for stopping by. Appreciate everybody. Those who didn't stop by, same as always, go fuck yourself.